Chapter 389. No matter how much Tian Jiqin regretted it, it was already in front of him. He could only choose to advance and retreat together with Ling Yunfei. He knew Ling Yunhe's character very well. Since he chose to betray them, there was no turning back. Once Ling Yunhe escaped, he definitely wouldn't let him go. But this spiritual beast was really hard to deal with. It was a sea dragon, a sea beast that was good at using water element spells. Among the 5 elements, metal was for strength, wood was for vitality, water was for moisture, fire was for heat, and earth was for density. Among the 5 elements, wood, water, and earth all had the effect of trapping. Water was the most troublesome because it was soft and hard to break, so it was most suitable for entanglement. Tian Jiqin was a formation master. Without the support of other cultivators, he had no other way to deal with water spells except to dodge or trap them. She also knew formations very well. Once he made a move, she would remind her spiritual beast how to dodge. In addition, Tian can always come to his side intentionally or unintentionally. He was afraid of Tian Can's terrifying strength and didn't dare to ignore him, so he was pinned down. After fighting like this for a while, Tian Jiqin couldn't help but feel annoyed. He had been friends with Ling Yunhe for 100 years and they often worked together. Every time he encountered a dangerous situation, he only needed to lay a formation at the right time. Ling Yunhe would stand in front of him and kill the enemies. If he encountered a crisis, Ling Yunhe would also think of a solution and wouldn't let him restrain him. With this thought, he looked at Ling Yunhe, who was standing in a daze, with complicated feelings. He had always thought that Ling Yunhe wasn't generous enough to him, and that he always relied on his own strength to ignore his existence, ordering him around to do this and that. Only now did he realize that the reason why he had been able to live so easily for over 100 years was because Ling Yunhe had stood in front of him. Unfortunately, he had no time for regret now. Thinking of the conditions Ling Yunfei offered him, Tian Jiqin's eyes were once again filled with fighting spirit. So what if he didn't have Ling Yunhe in the future? With those medicinal pills, he could try to advance to the late stage. How precious was a formation master in the late stage of the core formation realm. Even if he never went out again and didn't go on adventures, there would still be people begging him to exchange natural treasures for the formation tools he made. At that time, it wouldn't be impossible for him to advance to the nascent soul realm. Yunfei, retreat! Tian Jiqin shouted. It was meaningless to blame Ling Yunfei now. Ling Yunfei's strength was indeed inferior to Ling Yunhe's, and his battle experience was not as rich as Ling Yunhe's. However, he was not weak. The reason why he was being suppressed was because Tian Can's strength was stronger, and it just so happened to counter Ling Yunfei. He had this kind of situation when he was with Ling Yunhe. The flying sword is distracting the enemy. Don't fight him head-on. Calm down. After Tian Jiqin finished speaking, he waved his hand and a layer of mist rose up, pouncing towards Tian Can. This time, the support came at the right time. Tian Can's attack was blocked, and Ling Yunfei was able to escape. Ling Yunfei said, Jiqian. Hearing this, Ling Yunfei took out a small black object from his Qianquan bag and threw it to Lil Fan. Xiao Fan, retreat! Mo Tiange also shouted. It had Tian Zhou. Tian. Fan. Jiqian, Shao of the Long. Shao, quickly, he Xiaha. He Shi. Ling, he Yifan was surprised. It had never seen such a magic weapon in the sea and didn't know how to deal with it. Mo Tiange patted her forehead and watched helplessly as Yifan ran around in the mound. She could tell it wasn't an ordinary mound. This earth elemental magic weapon was very powerful. Yifan didn't have any experience and couldn't get away in a short time. Ling Yunfei was overjoyed when he saw the Jiqian trap Yifan. Tian Jiqian's voice came to his ears, Here. Distract him with your flying swords. After a while, Tianjichin broke free and pounced on them again. But this time, he didn't have such an advantage. With Tianjichin's command, Ling Yunfei was no longer as anxious as before. Yifan was trapped again, and the two of them were fighting against one. Tianjichin was constantly worried about Tianjichin's invisible array, and was also disturbed by Ling Yunfei's dual flying swords. The situation was in a deadlock. Fellow Daoist Qin. Tianjichin shouted, "When are you going to stop?" "I'm going to watch fellow Daoist Tian can show off his power," Mo Tiange said with a smile. Although Yifan was trapped, Ling Yunfei and Tianjichin were busy with Tianjichin and Tianjichin, so they didn't have time to deal with Yifan. She didn't need to worry about Yifan's safety at all. You. Tianjichin was so angry that he glared at her. "If you keep sitting here, I'll take everything for myself." He was strong, but the two cultivators in front of him weren't mediocre. One was in the middle stage of the core formation realm, and the other was in the early stage of the core formation realm. Both of them weren't weak. He wouldn't lose, but it would be difficult for him to win. "Then you can take everything for yourself." Mo Tiange continued to say lazily, "I don't like their things anyway." Tianjichin rolled his eyes. Seeing that Mo Tiange was going to stand by and do nothing, he clenched his teeth angrily. He didn't believe he couldn't deal with these two without this woman's help. "Fellow Daoist Tian can, left. "Oh, I said left. How could you ignore the right?" "The top. Look at you." "I said the top, but you paid attention to the bottom. You're disobedient. Now you're being beaten, aren't you?" "Shut up." Tianjichin threw a punch. The powerful aura blocked Ling Yunfei's short flying sword. He immediately jumped back to avoid the long flying sword. He didn't even have the strength to glare at Mo Tiange. He regretted it. Why did he have to meddle while that woman was meddling in other people's business? After all, he didn't lose anything. While Tianjichin was angry, Tianjichin and Ling Yunfei were both happy and surprised. They were happy because Mo Tiange didn't plan to help them now, so they wouldn't be flustered. They were surprised because she looked so relaxed, as if she had a card up her sleeve. Did she have a backup plan? After all, if Tianjichin was beaten by them, she wouldn't get any benefits. Although the spirit trapping formation could temporarily trap cultivators, she was a middle-stage core formation cultivator who was proficient in formations. She definitely wouldn't be trapped for so long. Tianjichin thought about it but couldn't come up with a solution. Tianjichin was so angry that he attacked even more fiercely. For a moment, the two of them were flustered. "Yunfei, calm down." Tianjichin shouted, "Don't let them mess up our formation. Otherwise, we'll lose for sure." Ling Yunfei took a deep breath and focused his eyes. If Tianjichin was defeated and killed by taking a step back, then he would die without a place to be buried. Would Ling Yunhe let him go for the sake of their 200 years of brotherhood? Maybe he would, but Tianjichin and Qin Wei definitely wouldn't. Even if Ling Yunhe managed to escape, he would not be a match for the two of them with his serious injuries. It would already be good if the two of them were willing to spare Ling Yunhe's life. The most likely outcome would be, as Qin Wei had said, to kill the two of them, then kill Ling Yunhe, and take all of their belongings. This was the style of cultivators with tyrannical strength like them. Under Ling Yunfei's control, the inseparable swords, one long and one short, formed a circle above him. One was light blue and the other was silver. They emitted dazzling lights. Sword aura and spiritual aura were everywhere. Tianjichin was delighted. He knew this was Ling Yunfei's most powerful killing move. If he could use it successfully, it wouldn't be impossible to kill Tianjichin in one move. Therefore, he had to make sure Ling Yunfei wouldn't be affected. In his mind, the battle situation was as clear as the palm of his hand. Everything was as clear as the heart, and he naturally displayed his skills. He found the feeling of fighting side by side with Ling Yunhe. That's right, what he did today was right. Ling Yunhe was not the only one. As long as he was strong enough, he could also control the situation. The jade plate in his hand spun madly. 5 lights flashed on it, and yin and yang changed in an instant. Tian Jiqian stared at the jade plate without blinking, waiting for the perfect moment when the 5 elements and yin and yang in his body were broken. Clang, chi, he heard 2 sounds. The first was the sound of sharp weapons clashing, and the second was the sound of a sharp weapon breaking a body. In the next moment, his eyes widened. The jade plate didn't stop spinning. It spun more and more crazily. In the end, it missed the moment when the formation was set up. This caused a small disturbance in the 5 elements and yin and yang in his body. He held the jade plate tightly. The jade plate spun faster and faster, but the spiritual light on it became dimmer and dimmer. He knew that this was because the jade plate had lost the support of its owner's spiritual aura. He slowly turned around and saw Ling Yunhe standing expressionlessly not far away. He only had time to say, "You." Ling Yunhe moved his right hand, and the crescent moon jade knife fell from Tian Jiqian's body. Fresh blood spurted out. Seeing Tian Jiqian slowly collapse, Ling Yunhe lowered his gaze and said softly, "I only used 1 sentence to invite you. But do you remember that you didn't even need to say a word to invite me?" Tian Jiqian opened his eyes wide and stared at Ling Yunhe. In his eyes, there was fear, panic, hatred, anger, and even more so, regret. Ling Yunhe continued, "I thought that we didn't need to talk about a deal or a reward. We only needed to say a word, and we would die for each other. I thought that this was what it meant to be a friend of life and death. I was wrong." Tian Jiqian's eyes finally lost their light. No one knew whether the last thought that lingered in his mind was regret or not. His death caused the ongoing battle to stop. Tian retracted his claws and stood not far away to watch this scene. Ling Yunfei, on the other hand, was frozen. Ling Yunhe held the crescent moon jade knife in his hand tightly and walked toward him step by step. Ling Yunfei's 2 flying swords stopped involuntarily. He watched as Tian walked toward him. The knife light and the sword light flashed at the same time. The long sword pierced through Ling Yunhe's body. At the same time, a crescent moon light shone, and an extremely sharp spiritual aura pierced through Ling Yunfei's chest. "This sword is for you. For the past 200 years, I have never truly understood your heart." Ling Yunhe stood there quietly, letting the blood spurt out from the wound on his body. "This sword is for me. For the past 200 years, for your greed and ungratefulness." Second brother. Ling Yunfei closed his eyes, and tears rolled down his cheeks. Finally, he collapsed. None of the reasons could hide his true feelings. If he was capable enough, he wouldn't need second brother to give him anything. If he was capable enough, he could also stand in second brother's position. He knew that he couldn't get it, so he was angry. All of this was because of jealousy. Chapter 390. The mound that trapped Xiaofan turned back into a small black lump of soil and fell down. Now that Tian Jiqian was dead, the spirit-trapping formation also lost its effect. Mo Tiange sighed, walked over to pick up the small lump of soil, patted Xiaofan's head, and threw it a medicinal pill. "You can't eat it anymore. Eat this." Xiaofan swallowed the medicinal pill and asked, "Master, did I lose?" "Your cultivation level is still low, so it's normal that you can't beat him." Mo Tiange stroked its head. Xiao Wo was too naughty. Fei was now the king, so Xiaofan was the most obedient. After comforting Xiaofan, Mo Tiange looked up. Tian Can was looking at Ling Yunhe thoughtfully with his arms crossed. Ling Yunhe stood silently in front of Tian Jiqian and Ling Yunfei's bodies without moving. Mo Tiange couldn't help but sneer. Ling Yunfei and Tian Jiqian were really not smart. They had such a close relationship with Ling Yunhe, but they actually looked down on him. Even though half of his body was splashed with black water and he was injured, he was Ling Yunhe, a top cultivator of Zhuyan sect. How could he be trapped by a small spirit-trapping formation and wait for death? She intervened because she knew Ling Yunhe wouldn't lose the ability to fight back. That being the case, she did him a favor. These two people were probably used to being protected by Ling Yunhe, so they ignored this problem. After the spirit-trapping formation was used, it would consume the spiritual aura of the cultivator who set it. Tian Jiqian used two spirit-trapping formations and also used formations to fight Tian Can and Xiaofan. How could he maintain the perfect effect? Before long, Ling Yunhe was able to get out of the formation. Before this, his dantian and meridians had long been protected by Mo Tiange's medicinal pills. That black water corroded half of his body. Although it was a serious injury, it was only an external injury. It didn't substantially affect his strength. Tian Jiqian and Ling Yunfei thought he was so seriously injured that he could be killed easily, so they attacked him rashly. After standing for a while, Ling Yunhe's eyes finally moved. He gathered some spiritual aura in his palm and pressed it on the wound. The blood flow slowly stopped. Then he turned to Tian Can and Mo Tiange, nodded and said faintly, "Fellow Taoists, thank you." Tian Can was the first to speak. He chuckled and said, "Brother Ling, don't you think it's too early to thank me? How do you know that fellow Taoist Qin and I won't attack you?" Ling Yunhe smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Fellow Taoists, if that's the case, why did you help me back then? Wouldn't it be better to wait for both of us to suffer?" Tian Can stopped smiling and looked at Ling Yunhe. "You are a nice person, but your eyesight is not good." Ling Yunhe wanted to laugh, but in the end, he didn't. He lowered his head and looked at the corpses of Tian Jiqian and Ling Yunfei in silence for a long time. An hour ago, these were his most trusted brothers and closest friends. Now, they were two corpses. Moreover, they were killed by him. Do you regret it? Of course not. Since they had chosen to betray, this was the consequence they had to bear. Although he valued friendship, he wouldn't be soft-hearted to betrayers. Fellow Taoists. Ling Yunhe's eyes gradually became firm. He slowly raised his hand and bowed slightly. His injuries were a bit serious, so he had to be gentle. "I'll always remember your great kindness. Please meet me in the Ling clan's mansion in 3 months. I'll certainly repay you then." Mo Tiange and Tian Can didn't say anything. Ling Yunhe's expression was very calm, but between his eyebrows, there was a kind of speechless sadness and deep fatigue. Although they had indeed lent a helping hand for the sake of certain benefits, the two of them chose to remain silent at this time. Ling Yunhe didn't wait for them to answer. He took the Qinkuan bags from Tian Jiqian and Ling Yunfei's bodies and threw them to them. His tone was still indifferent. "Now that this is over, I'll go back to heal my injuries. See you in 3 months." After he finished speaking, he put away their corpses, shook his sleeves, stepped on his flying sword, and slowly flew to the exit of the valley. "Fellow Taoist Ling." Ling Yunhe stopped but didn't look back. "Fellow Taoist Qin, is there anything else?" Mo Tiange sighed softly. She picked up the 2 flying swords on the ground and threw them to him. "These are your younger brother's natal magic weapons. They're useless to us. Fellow Taoist Ling, you can keep them as a memento." Ling Yunhe held the pair of flying swords and was speechless. After losing their master, they had already lost their luster and became useless. He took a deep breath and put them away. Thank you. Then he put the two flying swords into his sleeves and quickly disappeared into the forest. Asterisk asterisk asterisk, fellow Daoist Tian Can, we should divide the loot. Tian Can was startled to hear Mo Tianga's voice. Ha! Oh! Mo Tianga crossed her arms, tilted her head, and stared at him. Tian Can felt scared and stared at her. Fellow Daoist Qin, why are you looking at me like that? Although you're young and beautiful, I've never been interested in women. Mo Tianga nodded. Yes, of course you're not interested in women. Maybe you're a little interested in men. Tian Can's eyes widened. What did you say? Mo Tianga looked like she was smiling. She walked around him twice then said, do you really think I can't recognize you? Fellow Daoist Nye. After a while, Tian Can sighed. He took off his bamboo hat, pulled off his mask, and wiped his face, revealing Nye Wushang's delicate and pretty face. When did you find me? She asked in her own voice. Seeing the face she expected, Mo Tianga smiled. You underestimate how familiar I am with you. Nye Wushang was stunned. What do you mean? Mo Tianga said, although your appearance, voice, and weapon have changed, your behavior and fighting style all have traces of familiarity. I don't know many people in Yunzhong, so the answer to a martial cultivator who gives me a familiar feeling is too simple. Most importantly, after that conversation, her intuition told her that Tian Can was a woman, and she even had a good impression of her. Because of that, she began to pay attention to Tian Can's every move. Only then did she realize that Tian Can and Nye Wushang had inexplicable similarities. Tian Can was thin and small, about the same size as Nye Wushang. Tian Can was dressed in black, which matched Nye Wushang's preference. Tian Can covered his face, so she couldn't see his mouth when he spoke. Nye Wushang was doing ventriloquism. Tian Can's weapon was a claw. Nye Wushang used boxing gloves, but when Mo Tianga met her for the first time more than 60 years ago, she used a claw. With so many suspicious points added together, the answer was obvious. Something flashed in Nye Wushang's eyes, but in the end, she laughed in a low voice. I really didn't expect someone would remember me. After a moment of silence, Mo Tianga asked, did you get rid of the devil aura in your body? Nye Wushang looked up at her and smiled. I thought the first question you'd ask me would be how I advanced to the middle stage so quickly. Mo Tianga nodded. If you don't mind, you can tell me one by one. You're really impolite. Nye Wushang wanted to get angry, but in the end, she just shook her head and laughed. She looked around then raised her chin. Let's talk after we get out. This place really isn't a good place to stay for a long time. Although they were already out of the dangerous inner valley, the outer valley was still full of spiritual aura. If they didn't get out as soon as possible, it would be difficult if they encountered some troublesome things again. Mo Tianga agreed. Okay. The two of them put away their things. Nye Wushang restored her disguise and left the valley together. In such a short time, Ling Yunhe had already disappeared without a trace. The big tree they entered the valley from had traces of a restriction being broken, so presumably, he'd left safely. He hadn't left for long, but the exit was still there. Mo Tianga and Nye Wushang didn't need to break another restriction, so they could directly leave through the exit of the restriction he broke. The two of them talked about where they were going. Both said they didn't have a specific goal, so they simply went to Descending Star City together. On the way, the two of them talked about what happened after they parted. Mo Tianga was very surprised that Nye Wushang advanced to the middle stage in just 1 year. When they parted, Nye Wushang still hadn't escaped from North Pole Island. Even if she didn't encounter any accidents on the way and directly found a suitable place for closed-door meditation, it would have only been a whole year since then. Logically speaking, this amount of time wasn't enough for a cultivator to advance. It only took Enchanting 15 years to advance from the early stage to the middle stage, but her fated chances were different. She had long cultivated to the peak of the early stage of the core formation realm. She needed about 2 years to prepare to advance and stabilize her realm. Nia Wusheng answered this question. She didn't understand martial cultivation. It was harder for martial cultivators to advance than it was for ordinary cultivators, but the process of advancement was a bit simpler. During their daily cultivation, they condensed spiritual aura through body tempering and other methods. Therefore, they only needed to condense the spiritual aura they usually condensed into their gold cores in order to advance. Before this, the condensation of her spiritual aura had long reached the requirements for advancement, but she never had the time to enter closed-door meditation. After stealing a treasure from Tianyan sect, she blended into the group of cultivators going out to sea. Later, she randomly found a small island in the inland sea to avoid Tianyan sect's pursuit and conveniently entered closed-door meditation to advance. With that treasure temporarily suppressing the primordial devil aura in her body, her advancement was very smooth. In less than half a year, she broke out of her closed-door meditation, crossed the sea, and arrived in Eastern Tang. After arriving in Eastern Tang, she changed her name to Tian Can and wandered around aimlessly. By chance, she met Ling Yunhe. Seeing her outstanding strength, Ling Yunhe invited her to Carefree Valley. At this point, Nia Wushang was still worried about the primordial devil aura in her body. Although Tianyan sect's treasure could temporarily suppress her devil aura, it couldn't be eradicated. Therefore, she took this opportunity to make a request to Ling Yunhe. Ling Yunhe agreed, so she joined the group for the trip to Carefree Valley. To her surprise, she actually saw Enchanting again in this group. She knew Enchanting wasn't weak. When they first met, Enchanting's cultivation level was clearly weaker than hers. When they met in the core formation realm, they were already on par. When they met again on North Pole Island, Enchanting even surpassed her in one fell swoop and advanced to the middle stage of the core formation realm. Now that she herself had advanced to the middle stage of the core formation realm, out of curiosity, she wanted to test Enchanting's strength. Thus, the sudden attack outside Ling Clan's mansion happened. At this point, Enchanting's interest was piqued. In that case, what's fellow Daoist Nie's evaluation of my strength? Nia Wushang was silent for a long time before she answered, if I couldn't suppress you in the beginning, I'd most likely lose. Enchanting had just witnessed Nia Wushang's real strength, so what she said was somewhat modest, but it was basically true. Nia Wushang's body was tyrannical. If they fought speed with speed, Enchanting would have to be careful. However, if they fought for a long time, that would be her strength. Thinking up to this point, Enchanting smiled and said, in that case, fellow Daoist Nia better not be my enemy. Nia Wushang glared at her. Why should I be your enemy? You're just looking for trouble. Chapter 391. This time, Enchanting found that Nia Wushang seemed to be different from before. Although the original Nia Wushang was extremely daring and acted decisively, Enchanting always felt her whole body was filled with a weary aura. It was as if she had no interest in everything around her, and even whether she was alive or not didn't matter to her. But this time, although she also wandered around aimlessly, she was full of enthusiasm and vitality. Enchanting couldn't help but ask, fellow Daoist Nia, you and I were separated for a year. Did you encounter some fated chances? Why do you seem different now that we meet again? Oh. Upon hearing what she said, Nia Wushang asked with great interest, what's different? Enchanting tilted her head and thought for a while then said, it seems that I've begun to enjoy the pleasures of life. Nia Wushang was stunned. She stopped smiling and looked at Tiange with deep eyes. I have to thank you for that, fellow Daoist Tiange was confused. Thank me for what? Except for taking her in for 3 days on North Pole Island, she didn't do anything to help her. And during those 3 days, nothing special happened, which was enough to change Nia Wushang's mind. Nia Wushang sighed softly, gazed into the distance and said slowly, for so many years, I've always dreamed of leaving Master's control and living a free life. But after going through so many hardships and escaping from the celestial pole to Yunzhong, I suddenly realized that I didn't know what to do. It's been more than 100 years. Everything I do is what Master wants me to do. Although I'm unwilling, I can't deny that Master gave me the meaning of living. Tiange wrinkled her brows. What are you talking about? You're a human, not a tool. Why do you need him to give you the meaning of living? Fellow Daoist you don't understand. Nia Wushang shook her head and said, your master gave you freedom, so you live for yourself. But I'm not. Before I left Master, I couldn't be considered a human at all. Nia Wushang smiled and didn't explain further. Some things were difficult for people who hadn't experienced them to understand. Or in other words, Master was too successful. Not only did he manipulate her life, but he also suppressed her nature. Therefore, after leaving him, she felt lost and lost the meaning of living. To high-level cultivators, 100 years wasn't a very long time, but it was her entire life. Fellow Daoist Nia Wushang suddenly asked, why did you leave the celestial pole and come to Yunzhong? This question was rather difficult for Tiange to answer. She went to Yunzhong to broaden her horizons and also to follow Yaoqing's footsteps. As for which was more important, even she herself found it hard to answer. Besides, she never thought of telling anyone about Yaoqing. Upon seeing the awkward expression on her face, Nia Wushang waved her hand and said, you don't need to answer me in detail. I know there are some things I can't tell outsiders. I'm just curious. You're a disciple of a famous school in the Celestial Pole, your cultivation is smooth, you have a master who loves his disciples as much as his life, and you've just become Taoist companions with your senior martial brother. You're at the height of your success, so why did you leave the Celestial Pole and come to Yunzhong? Nia Wushang had already thought about this question when the two of them reunited on North Pole Island. However, at that time, they were still considered enemies, so it wasn't convenient for her to ask. Now that she had asked, it could be considered as solving the confusion that had plagued her for the past year. Upon hearing this question, Tiange just looked at her with a smile. In fellow Daoist Nia's eyes, what kind of person am I? As a disciple of a famous school, my cultivation is smooth, I have a master and a Taoist companion, so I should enjoy the envious gazes of others in the celestial pole. Should I wait for others to do everything for me? Nia Wushang was somewhat unable to answer. Her intuition told her that Tiange wasn't that kind of person. However, in the celestial pole, weren't all female cultivators with superior backgrounds like that? They didn't need to worry about their own cultivation path, their elders and husbands would pave the way for them. Without needing Nia Wushang to answer, Tiange already knew what she was thinking. She said, if I only enjoyed the shadow of my master and senior martial brother, even if I formed my nascent soul, I wouldn't be able to achieve the great Tao in the end. Nia Wushang suddenly turned to look at her, her gaze unblinking. Achieve the great Tao? Of course. Nia Wushang's surprised look puzzled Tiange. Could it be that fellow Daoist Nia never thought about achieving the great Tao one day and ascending to become an immortal? Nia Wushang took a deep breath then solemnly saluted her. It wasn't until now that I realized I underestimated fellow Daoist achieving the great Tao, ascending to become an immortal. How many cultivators nowadays still thought about these things? Yes, all cultivators who set foot on the path to immortality wanted longevity. However, after the Middle Ages, the world changed into mulberry fields. For more than 100,000 years, no one had ever ascended to become an immortal. Even deification realm cultivators were few and far between. Most cultivators gave up on their desire to become immortals and turned to pursue power and longevity. Because of this, there was no longer a saying that immortals and devils couldn't coexist. Whether it was immortal cultivators or devil cultivators, the goals they pursued were no longer fundamentally different. It was hard to say whether all of this was the degeneration of cultivators or the helplessness of the path to immortality. Nevertheless, those who could still persist on the path to immortality were definitely people with firm willpower and were worthy of admiration. Seeing Nia Wushang's solemn expression, Mo Tiange couldn't help but laugh. I'm just a core formation cultivator now. The so-called Great Tao is still out of my reach, and my Tao heart is only a word. Why do you have to be like this, fellow Taoist Nye? There was no smile on Nia Wushang's face. She said, if fellow Taoist Mo only made me feel that there's still some joy in living when we met on North Pole Island, then fellow Taoist Mo's words today made me see a whole new world. From now on, Nia Wushang, don't be trapped in the past anymore. Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows in surprise. Fellow Taoist Nia, Nia Wushang looked at the distant mountain peaks and raging clouds. She felt that the world was so vast, so why did she have to abandon that free future for the past darkness? Achieving the Great Tao and cultivating to become an immortal, in the past 100 years, she never thought about it and didn't dare to think about it. But it was different now. She was no longer bound and could exist freely between heaven and earth. That being the case, why couldn't she pursue the true meaning of Tao? Abandon the primordial devil aura and become a real cultivator. After crossing Mount Jiaoling and entering northern Qilin country in the north, the vast green mountains were covered with a layer of faint black aura, devil aura. To the north of Mount Jiaoling was Starfall City, a devil's domain in northern Qilin country. Northern Qilin country was the territory of Yunzhong's devil cultivators. They had 3 great devil monarchs, each occupying 3 big devil's domains. In addition, there were 7 small devil's domains, which were slightly smaller than the 3 big devil's domains but also had a large number of devil cultivators. Starfall City was one of the 7 small devil's domains. Nia Wushang said, the Lord of Starfall City is a devil cultivator in the early stage of the nascent soul realm. In northern Qilin country's devil's domain, his strength is neither strong nor weak. He can be considered a character. Mo Tiange nodded to show she understood. She realized that the cultivators in Yunzhong, whether they were cultivators or devil cultivators, weren't so strict about the way they addressed each other. For example, in the Celestial Pole, Xianqing School and Zhengfa sect both followed the tradition of core formation cultivators being master Taoists and nascent soul cultivators being Lord Taoists. The way they addressed each other was also a symbol of their status and cultivation level. But it wasn't like this in Yunzhong. In Tao schools, many nascent soul cultivators called themselves master Taoists, but it was purely a personal preference. Among devil cultivators, there were many who called themselves devil monarchs. Among them, only the 3 great devil monarchs were truly famous in Yunzhong. Thinking up to this point, Mo Tiange smiled faintly. She remembered devil monarch Black Moon, whom she met once in Sky Snow City. Although he was called devil monarch, he was only a core formation cultivator. Nia Wushang saw her expression and asked curiously, "What's so funny?" Mo Tiange asked, "Do you remember fellow Taoist Jing?" Nia Wushang was stunned. Her expression immediately became a bit uncomfortable. "Fellow Taoist Mo, about that matter, he didn't do anything to you in the end, right?" "Ha!" Mo Tiange was dumbfounded. Soon after, she realized she misunderstood and said with a smile, "No, I'm not talking about that matter. I met someone in Yunzhong who looked very similar to him." "Oh." Mo Tiange then told her about her encounter with Devil Monarch Black Moon. In the end, she said, when I saw that Devil Monarch Black Moon, I remembered him. Nia Wushang also smiled. In fact, although that fellow Daoist Jing was a bit frivolous, he could be considered reliable. That day, he knew Master's plan and fiercely resisted. If Master didn't keep him, he would have almost been killed. Mo Tiange didn't know about this matter. She was surprised. Really? And, at that time, you were already unconscious, Nia Wushang said. He said Qin Shoujing was one of the few people he could call a friend. Although he was dissolute, he didn't want to betray his friends. Moreover, the relationship between a man and a woman should be congenial and joyful. How could he be coerced into a dirty and improper act? After a pause, Nia Wushang sighed. I originally didn't have a good impression of him, but after this matter, I think he's much more lovable than those sanctimonious people. Seeing that Mo Tiange was lost in thought and silent, Nia Wushang raised her eyebrows and asked, Fellow Daoist Mo, what are you thinking about? Mo Tiange sighed. If that's really the case, Senior Marshal Brother Shoujing and I owe him a lot. Ha! Did he die on Demonic Mountain? Mo Tiange shook her head. He didn't. He also escaped the disaster on Demonic Mountain, but afterward, he had a falling out with a disciple of Venerable Swordsman Fulling of Gujin sect. If I remember correctly, Venerable Swordsman Fulling's disciple is the sect head of Gujin sect. What he did can be considered as offending the current power of Gujin sect, so he can't return to the sect. As she spoke, Mo Tiange told Nia Wushang about her encounter with Jing Xingji that day. At that time, Jing Xingji was injured and couldn't return to Gujin sect, so she didn't know how he was doing now. Nia Wushang said, Fellow Daoist Mo, what does this matter have to do with you? Even if this matter didn't happen, could he have obtained some fated chances on Demonic Mountain? Maybe he couldn't escape the disaster on Demonic Mountain and directly died. Even if he really obtained some rare treasures from Demonic Mountain, he and Venerable Swordsman Fulling's lineage have long been enemies, so it was only a matter of time before they fell out. Moreover, he was a person with his own opinions. He's never been happy in Gujin sect, so he probably wanted to leave long ago. Why should we worry about him? Mo Tiange was stunned and was speechless for a long time. Upon seeing this, Nia Wushang asked, Did I say something wrong? Mo Tiange sighed then nodded. No, you're right. I was thinking too much. That fellow Daoist Jing isn't someone who needs sympathy. In fact, there was one more point Mo Tiange didn't mention. She realized that she had become more soft-hearted than before. She was actually worried about others. Could it be that because she obtained too much, her feelings were also rich? Was this a good thing or a bad thing? Chapter 392. Not long after they left Jiaoling Mountain, the two of them arrived at Descending Star City. This was the first time Mo Tiange came into contact with a place where devil cultivators lived. At first glance, Descending Star City didn't look any different from the cities where cultivators lived. It had the same row upon row of houses, the same never-ending stream of people, and the same streets filled with stalls. However, the entire Descending Star City was shrouded in devil aura. The closer they got to the city center, the denser the devil aura became. Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang used their spiritual aura to protect themselves and walked into Descending Star City. This was different from devil cultivators. Devil cultivators wouldn't feel uncomfortable in an environment full of spiritual aura. They could even use spiritual aura to cultivate. The denser the spiritual aura, the better it was for them. However, cultivators would feel uncomfortable in an environment full of devil aura. This could be traced back to the distant past era, the origin of immortals and devils. According to legend, in the distant past era, spiritual aura and devil aura existed at the same time. Spiritual aura rose while devil aura sank. However, the world was dominated by spiritual aura and devil aura wasn't much. Later on, the world changed and devil aura became even lesser. Because of this, devil cultivators had a hard time surviving in this world. In order to survive in this new world, they learned to transform spiritual aura into devil aura through cultivation techniques and other changes. Devil territory was a special existence. A large number of devil cultivators lived there, causing devil aura to gather in the surroundings. Devil territory was formed. Because devil aura wasn't much in this world, cultivators rarely encountered it. Devil aura was mainly destructive, so when they encountered devil aura, their strength would be affected. Of course, as long as the devil aura wasn't too dense, high-level cultivators could move freely as long as they had spiritual aura to protect themselves. However, devil aura was a headache for low-level cultivators. They couldn't cultivate in devil territory at all, and mortals who lived in devil territory for a long time would have their lifespans affected. Therefore, there weren't many low-level cultivators in Descending Star City. Most of the people who came and went were foundation-building cultivators and those who did business were low-level devil cultivators. The two of them looked around but weren't interested in the things being sold here. Mo Tiange asked, "Fellow Daoist Nia, how much do you know about Descending Star City?" Nia Wushang looked around and said, "Nothing." Mo Tiange's forehead twitched. "Then why did you say you wanted to come?" "I had nothing to do anyway, so I just came to look around." Mo Tiange was speechless. Speaking of which, it was the same for her. Ling Yunhe had said that they would meet again in 3 months, so she could only collect the remaining payment for the trip to Carefree Valley 3 months later. Since she had nothing to do during these 3 months, she wanted to find a place to pass the time. After coming out of Carefree Valley, she happened to be the closest to Descending Star City. She had never seen the demonic area before, so she wanted to come and see what was going on. Originally, he was hoping that Nia Wushang would know a bit more, but unexpectedly, she was also completely clueless. The two of them stared at each other for a while before Nia Wushang finally said tentatively, "Why don't we find a tea house first?" Mo Tiange was a bit hesitant. "Are there also tea houses in the devil domain? Why don't we just ask?" Nia Wushang then pulled a low-level devil cultivator over. "Fellow Daoist, how do I get to Starfall City's tea house?" This devil cultivator's cultivation level was only in the 5th or 6th layer of the aura refining realm. When he was pulled by Mo Tiange and realized that they were two cultivators with unfathomable cultivation levels, he was startled and stammered, "They're over there." Nia Wushang loosened her grip then shrugged at Mo Tiange. "See, there are still some." A year ago, Mo Tiange found it hard to imagine that Nia Wushang would be like this. It was even harder to imagine that the two of them would be together like this. If they were no longer enemies after their encounter on North Pole Island, then their trip to Carefree Valley this time could be considered a little more like a friend. After walking along the street for a while and listening to the rising and falling sounds of hawking, Mo Tiange absent-mindedly felt as if she had returned to the celestial pole. When she was at Xianqing School, Luo Fengxue would occasionally invite her to take a walk outside to relax and chat. However, ever since her cultivation level gradually increased and Luo Fengxue became increasingly busy because she was in charge of the Steward's Hall on Suite du Pic, these kinds of opportunities became increasingly rare. During the 2 years they lived with Qin Shi, they were busy with countless things, so they didn't have this kind of mood. At this very moment, Mo Tiange couldn't help but smile as she experienced this leisurely contentment. After leaving Carefree Valley, she realized that she seemed to have become soft-hearted. She used to be scared, but after thinking about it carefully, she felt this wasn't a bad thing. When she was only a foundation building or even a small aura refining cultivator, she didn't dare to be soft-hearted because she was still too weak. If she was soft-hearted, it would easily affect her judgment and cause her to make mistakes. The result would very likely be a tragic death. Therefore, she could only clench her teeth and walk forward vigilantly but calmly. But now it was different. Even if she was facing a nascent soul cultivator, she wasn't someone who could only wait helplessly for death. She was no longer the Mo who could only survive by being cautious. In other words, she already possessed a certain amount of power, so she had the capital to be soft-hearted. Think about it, a small cultivator who carefully walked the world and struggled to cultivate, and a core formation cultivator who had a divine ability and was no longer at the mercy of others. Which one of them would be so easily soft-hearted? Perhaps most people would take it for granted that the small cultivator should be more soft-hearted, but in fact, it was usually the core formation cultivators who were more easily soft-hearted. This was because most of those soft-hearted small cultivators had already disappeared on the bumpy road to immortality. As for those core formation cultivators, they had long trained their judgment in their long cultivation lives. They only needed a split second to determine whether a matter was harmful or not. If it wasn't necessary, they could be a bit more soft-hearted because they had enough power and weren't afraid of the backlash. Therefore, from a certain point of view, this world was upside down. Only when one had power would they have the qualifications to be soft-hearted. Mo asked herself, could she determine whether a person or a matter would be harmful to her in a split second and then make the most appropriate handling of it? The answer was yes. In her long cultivation life, self-protection had already become a kind of instinct. Since she could, what was wrong with her being a bit more soft-hearted? But from another perspective, this wasn't a bad thing. In the aura refining realm, cultivators had to gather spiritual aura to transform their bodies. In the foundation building realm, they learned how to use spiritual aura and truly stepped into the gate of cultivation. From the core formation realm onward, they had to come into contact with the origin of spiritual aura and explore the true meaning of immortality. In the nascent soul realm, they had to comprehend the heavenly Tao. The more they comprehended, the more powerful their divine abilities would be. Because of that, after they reached the core formation realm, they originally had to put more emotions into their understanding of life. In order to cultivate one's mental state to be stronger, one had to understand more about one's heart. Therefore, whether it was Taoist, Buddhist, or Confucian schools, they all had the saying, the Grand Master forgets emotions, those who had emotions were ruthless. What are you thinking about? Nia Wushang's ear-piercing voice rang in her ears. Mo regained her train of thought from her meditation. She frowned then said, your voice is really unpleasant to the ears. Her original voice was only a bit hoarse and dull, but the disguised voice this time was really too unpleasant to the ears. It was as if her throat had already become a sieve, piercing and leaking air everywhere. Nia Wushang let out a low chuckle and said, there's no other way. If I don't do this, how can I conceal my accent? Mo rolled her eyes. You're just looking for trouble. In such a big place like Yunzhong, who knows what kind of person Nia Wushang is? It's not a big deal for you to appear with your original appearance, right? Nia Wushang said, I stole Tianyan's sex treasure. If I'm discovered, that's indeed a problem, but there's no need to make yourself look like this, right? Do you think it's easy to change your appearance? Nia Wushang cast a sidelong glance at her. Why don't you give it a try? I didn't steal other people's sex treasure, so why would I need it? Mo thought for a moment then said, but I can indeed give it a try. Nia Wushang was just about to ask further when the two of them saw the tall tea flag in Starfall City. The two of them didn't hide their cultivation levels, so they were warmly received by the tea house waiter. Cultivation level represented strength, and strength represented wealth. If they could satisfy a high-level cultivator, even a casual tip from them would be a rare income for a low-level cultivator. The two of them didn't plan to make friends with cultivators in the same realm as them, so they left after asking the tea house waiter some questions. The waiter said there were inns in the Devil Domain specifically for cultivators to stay in, so they only needed to pay attention to the signs outside. The two of them walked around the area and soon found the inn the waiter mentioned. Outside the inn, there was a small flag with a white cloud painted on it. As soon as they stepped into the inn, someone immediately came to greet them. "Seniors, are you looking for a place to stay?" Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows. The person who received them was actually a low-level cultivator, not a devil cultivator. She glanced around. This inn was quite big and didn't have many people. Most of the people inside were in the foundation building realm. This inn seemed to be of high standard and mostly served high-level cultivators. Mo Tiange glanced at Nie Wuxiang. Seeing that she was satisfied, she said, "Not bad. Do you have a quiet place here?" "Yes, yes, yes." The low-level cultivator who received them said with a smile, "Our inn specializes in receiving high-level cultivators like seniors. We can even rent an Immortal's cave. May I know how long seniors want to stay? Do you want an ordinary inn room, a separate small courtyard, or an Immortal's cave?" Mo Tiange looked at Nie Wuxiang. She was quite casual about this, but she didn't know whether Nie Wuxiang had any special requirements. Nie Wuxiang looked at her and said, "I want a separate small courtyard." Mo Tiange nodded. A small courtyard was indeed a good choice. They both liked peace and quiet. An ordinary inn room could only be used as a gathering place at most. There were too many people, so living there was definitely not suitable. Moreover, an Immortal's cave was too troublesome. They might leave at any time, so a small courtyard was enough. "Then let's ask for a quiet courtyard. We don't know how long we'll stay, so just pick a good one." The low-level cultivator smiled and said, "Okay, a superior courtyard. 2 spirit stones a day." 2 spirit stones. This price was a bit expensive. Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows. Before she could ask, the quick-witted waiter already answered with a smile, "Senior, you don't know, but our inn is for cultivators. It takes a bit of effort in the Devil Domain, so the price is a bit higher." Mo Tiange thought about it and accepted this explanation. She looked at Nie Wuxiang. Obviously, she also didn't care about 2 spirit stones a day, so she said, "Lead the way." The waiter respectfully made a "please" gesture. "Seniors, please follow me." Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang were about to follow the low-level cultivator inside when suddenly, a person covered in devil aura stepped into the inn. "Fellow Taoists who cultivate, please wait." Chapter 393. Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang stopped in astonishment when they heard the voice and sensed the devil aura surging from the other party. They turned around to look at the door. The person who called them was a middle-stage core formation devil cultivator in his 30s. He had black hair, a short beard, and an aquiline nose, which made him look shrewd and gloomy. "Fellow Taoist, are you calling us?" Mo Tiange asked when she saw this person looking at her and Nie Wuxiang. The person looked at the two of them carefully then said, "Yes. Fellow Taoists, my surname is Liang. I'm a ceremonial elder in Descending Star City." Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang cupped their fists at the same time. "So it's Elder Liang." Seeing that the two of them were calm and neither servile nor overbearing, Elder Liang knew they were knowledgeable people, so he smiled and returned their greetings. "Fellow Taoists, you don't have to be so polite. May I know how I should address you?" Mo Tiange held back her laughter. To be honest, it was fine if this Elder Liang didn't smile, but he looked a bit gloomy. Once he smiled, people would immediately feel he was up to no good. "I'm Qin Wei." Although she was laughing inwardly, she still maintained impeccable politeness on the surface. Nie Wuxiang just cupped her fists and said faintly, "Tian Can." Oh, so it's fellow Daoist Qin and fellow Daoist Tian Can. Elder Liang went straight to the point. May I know why you've come to Descending Star City? Mo Tiange glanced at Nie Wushang. Nie Wushang wasn't interested in dealing with people, so she raised her chin and signaled Mo Tiange to answer. Mo Tiange said, "We're just passing by and just strolling around." Oh. I see. Elder Liang's gaze shifted back and forth between the two of them as if he was weighing whether she was telling the truth or not. In the next moment, he still had a smile on his face. Fellow Daoists, your cultivation levels are outstanding. It's really rare for you to come to Descending Star City. I wonder if I can have the honor of inviting you to the City Lord's mansion as guests. Mo Tiange and Nie Wushang glanced at each other in surprise. They were both people who often traveled outside and were experienced and knowledgeable, but this was the first time they encountered this kind of situation. It was rare for cultivators to be friendly with each other unless they wanted to befriend each other. They had only just arrived at Starfall Star, but Elder Liang had coincidentally come to invite them. Was it an accident, or did he have some ulterior motive? With that thought in mind, Mo Tiange bluntly asked, "May I ask Elder Liang what's the matter? If it's just a mutual acquaintance, why don't we wait for fellow Daoist Tian Can and I to settle down before going to the City Lord's mansion? There's no need for that." Elder Liang's eyes flickered as he looked around. As soon as he arrived, the attendant had already stood to the side. Now, the attendants of the inn could only watch from afar, not daring to come forward. He said, "I won't hide it from you too. This is an order from the city governor. In the near future, all cultivators above the completion level who appear in Fallen Star must come to the city governor's palace." Mo Tiange was dumbfounded. Elder Liang had a very solemn expression on his face. Although he didn't intend to force her, his attitude was very firm, so she said, "Elder Liang, please forgive us. We're all core formation cultivators. If we don't have a clear reason, it's inconvenient for us to go with Elder Liang." Her words were very clear. How could core formation cultivators be easily pressured by force? The City Lord of Fallen Star City was only an early-stage nascent soul devil cultivator. Although they weren't as good as him, they wouldn't be at the mercy of others. If this Elder Liang explained things properly, they would have to give the City Lord a bit of face since they were in Fallen Star City. However, if he didn't say anything and only used force to invite them, they wouldn't obediently let themselves be tied up. Elder Liang was obviously used to this. He didn't look embarrassed at all. He smiled and said, "Fellow Daoists, you don't need to be nervous. It's just that the City Lord has something to ask of you. As for what it is, it's inconvenient for me to tell you now. If fellow Daoists don't mind, we can talk as we walk." This Elder Liang's attitude was too calm. It really didn't seem like he was plotting anything. Mo Tiange and Nie Wushang glanced at each other. Nie Wushang said through voice transmission, "There's no harm in going and taking a look." Mo Tiange pondered for a moment then slowly nodded. She raised her head and said to Elder Liang, "That being the case, we'll go with Elder Liang." Elder Liang smiled and said politely, "Thank you for your cooperation, fellow Daoists. Please follow me." Right after he finished speaking, Elder Liang walked out of the inn. Mo Tiange stared at his back then waved at the waiter who served them before. "Is this really your ceremonial elder? Were there any other core formation cultivators recently invited into the City Lord's mansion?" The waiter hesitated for a moment before replying respectfully, "Senior, this is not something that normal cultivators like us who live in Descending Star City can know. Furthermore, core formation stage seniors rarely appear in the world. Our inn has only received 2 core formation stage seniors recently. However, this is indeed the ceremonial elder of Fallen Star City." "This is true. Right after he finished speaking, a foundation building cultivator dressed like a shopkeeper said, "Seniors, I do know a little about this matter. Yesterday, a core formation senior was invited to the city lord's mansion from this tea house." "Oh, thank you," Mo Tiange said to them, then turned around and left. Nia Wushang also followed her. "Fellow Daoist Nia," Mo Tiange said through voice transmission, "can you use your divine sense to check if there aren't any core formation cultivators in the city?" After a while, Nia Wushang replied, "Correct. Aside from you, me, and that elder Liang, there's only one core formation cultivator active in the east of the city." Mo Tiange nodded to show she understood. The city lord of Fallen Star City was an early-stage nascent soul cultivator. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be so few core formation cultivators in Fallen Star City. It seemed Elder Liang was right, all core formation cultivators were invited to the city lord's mansion. There were restrictions there, so they couldn't probe them. When the two of them walked out of the inn, Elder Liang was waiting not far away. When he saw them coming out, he greeted them with a smile. "Fellow Taoists, please." Mo Tiange nodded with a smile, then followed Elder Liang with Nia Wushang. With Elder Liang leading the way, the surrounding low-level cultivators all made way, giving the three of them a lot of space. "Elder Liang." Nia Wushang lifted her bamboo hat and said, "Can you tell us the purpose of the city lord's invitation?" Elder Liang casually cast a soundproof barrier, then said, "Fellow Taoists, you didn't come to Fallen Star City for anything important, did you?" Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang had already answered this question, but under the circumstances at that time, it was very likely they just said it casually, so Elder Liang asked again cautiously. Mo Tiange said, "Correct. Fellow Daoist Tian Kan and I were just passing by this place, so we decided to take a stroll and broaden our horizons." Elder Liang nodded with a smile. "That's good." He paused for a moment, then said, "I won't hide it from you too. 2 months ago, the city lord invited all the core formation fellow Taoists who appeared in Fallen Star City to the city lord's mansion for one thing." "Oh. Based on the scale of Descending Star City, 2 months should be enough for them to hire more than 10 core-bearing cultivators, right? In addition to the core formation cultivators in the city, there should be at least 20 to 30 of them. What kind of matter would require so many core formation cultivators? I can't reveal the reason for this matter in advance without the city lord's permission. However, that's the gist of the matter. Of course, fellow Taoists don't need to worry. The city lord will definitely pay you for this matter." "Elder Liang," Nia Wushang suddenly said coldly, "can't we refuse this matter?" Elder Liang was stunned. He cautiously glanced at Nia Wushang, then said, "I don't know about this. I'm only responsible for inviting all the core formation fellow Taoists who appeared in Fallen Star City to the city lord's mansion. The city lord will explain this matter to you. However, up until now, no one has refused." Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows but didn't say anything. This matter was a bit unusual. Within 2 months, all the core formation cultivators who appeared in Fallen Star City were invited, but not a single one refused. Most core formation cultivators appeared in the mortal world because they had something to do. There were very few core formation cultivators like Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang who wandered around. Why didn't those people refuse when they had something to do? Was it simply because the person who invited them was a nascent soul cultivator? Offending a nascent soul cultivator was indeed something core formation cultivators had to avoid. However, how many core formation cultivators had extraordinary identities and strong backgrounds? The influence of Fallen Star City could only be considered SOSO in the devil domain of the northern Qilin kingdom. It wasn't worthwhile for them to force themselves just to avoid offending the city lord, right? Based on this, either the reward was too shocking for those core formation cultivators to refuse, or the city lord of Fallen Star City played some tricks and they couldn't refuse. Which one was it? Mo Tiange looked at Nia Wushang, and Nia Wushang was also looking at her. Fellow Daoist Mo, what do you think? Nia Wushang sent her a secret message. If it was the former, it wouldn't be a problem, but if it was the latter, rashly going to the city lord's mansion wasn't a good choice. Once they entered someone else's territory, they'd have to let them make the decisions. But if they didn't go, they couldn't do anything. Although Elder Liang's attitude wasn't bad, he was very firm. They were already in Fallen Star City. If they didn't go now, the city lord would personally make a move, which would be troublesome for them. Mo Tiange pondered for a while, then said, Elder Liang, what if I don't want to see the city lord? What would you do? Elder Liang smiled. This isn't the first time I've answered this question. Fellow Daoist Qin, there were several core formation fellow Daoists who said they had matters to attend to and couldn't go. I really couldn't persuade them, so the city lord personally went to see them. Later on, those fellow Daoists all agreed. Elder Liang only said a few simple words, but Mo Tiange understood a lot from his words. Those core formation cultivators were very likely to unyieldingly express they didn't want to go to the city lord's mansion, and they might even forcibly leave. As for the persuasion Elder Liang mentioned, it was very likely he'd use force to force them to go. If they couldn't defeat them, he'd report it to the city lord. As for whether this city lord of Fallen Star City would use force or benefits to make them agree after he personally went to see them, Mo Tiange didn't know. This made Mo Tiange even more uncertain. Should she go or not? If she didn't go, she'd most likely have to fight, and she'd most likely have to face nascent soul cultivators. If she went, it would be hard to predict whether it would be a blessing or a curse. Fellow Daoist Mo, let's go and take a look. Upon hearing her voice, Mo Tiange turned around. Nia Wushang winked at her, then said through voice transmission, you know about my concealment method. I think you also have a secret escape method, right? Chapter 394. In the end, Mo Tiange accepted Nia Wushang's proposal. She was right. Although she didn't know what happened, she was sure those core formation cultivators' lives were in no danger. Since their lives weren't in danger, what was there for her to be afraid of? Nia Wushang once said her concealment technique was extraordinary. Even nascent soul cultivators would have a hard time detecting her. As for herself, she had the virtual sky world. As long as she could use spiritual aura and didn't get corroded by the dead aura like what happened to Ren Yufeng, escaping wouldn't be a problem. Moreover, she still had Mo Yaoqing's land shrinking ruler that she hadn't used yet. With that thought in mind, the two of them calmly followed Elder Liang. Elder Liang was very happy to see them. Both of them were in the middle stage of the core formation realm. If they were really unwilling, he'd be in trouble this time. He was too incompetent as an elder to always let the Castellan take action. After walking for a while, the three of them arrived at a mansion in the city. This mansion occupied a very large area and occupied the center of Starfall City where the devil aura was the densest. The whole mansion was shrouded in a devil aura restriction. If they rashly probed it with their divine sense, they'd be injured by the restriction. Elder Liang. Upon seeing Elder Liang approaching with the two of them, the cultivators guarding the mansion saluted respectfully. Elder Liang nodded faintly and said, "Open the restriction." Yes. The guard respectfully used his identity tablet to open the restriction of the mansion. Mo Tiange glanced at the mansion. The guards of the mansion were led by two foundation building cultivators and a team of 9th and 10th layer aura refining cultivators. One team guarded the gate while the other patrolled nearby. Considering the size of the mansion, two teams of guards were considered few. However, the mansion's power still came from the nascent soul Castellan, so the guards weren't very important. However, it seemed this Castellan wasn't ostentatious and should be a practical person. Elder Liang invited the two of them into the mansion. They walked through corridors and halls until they reached the back garden. Mo Tiange was a bit surprised. This castellan's way of treating guests was indeed a bit casual. However, when she thought the other party was a nascent soul cultivator, she felt relieved. Their cultivation levels weren't worthy of this castellan's courtesy. When they arrived at the back garden, Elder Liang directly led them into a small parlor and said, "Fellow Taoists, please wait here for a moment. The city lord will be here soon." Mo Tiange nodded to show she understood. Elder Liang smiled and invited the two of them to take a seat. After sending out a message talisman, he sat beside them and chatted with them. Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang's minds weren't on this either. They casually agreed while waiting for the Master of Descent Star City to arrive. After a while, a strong aura approached them from afar, heading towards the flower hole. At the same time, a voice rang in their ears, "Welcome to Descending Star City, my friends." As soon as he finished speaking, a figure quickly flashed into the small reception hall and landed on the main seat. This kind of aura was undoubtedly that of a nascent soul cultivator. The three of them stood up, and Elder Liang rushed forward to greet him. "Subordinate greets the city lord." Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang also stood up to show their respect to nascent soul cultivators. When they looked up, they saw a young man dressed in luxurious clothes sitting on the main seat. This young man was very young. He looked like he was only 15 or 16 years old. He wasn't tall, and he was very skinny, unlike an adult man. Even if he was slightly shorter, his shoulders would still be broad and sturdy. This made his luxurious clothes look like a burden piled on his body, and it didn't feel like it was fitting at all. His left eye was covered with a blindfold, and he had only one eye. Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang were both experienced and knowledgeable people. In an instant, they finished examining the city lord of Descending Star City, but their faces didn't show any signs of surprise. Although this city lord looked young, his voice carried a sense of seniority. Furthermore, there were traces of time on his eyebrows and hands. His actual age was definitely not young anymore. "Greetings, city lord." Mo Tiange slightly lowered her eyebrows and cupped her hands to greet him. Then, she immediately asked, "Why did you order Elder Liang to invite us to the city lord's mansion?" The young man's single eye was carefully examining the two of them. At that moment, he waved his hand, signaling Elder Liang to leave. He then invited them to sit down again before saying, "Although your cultivation levels are only in the middle stage of the core formation realm, your spiritual aura is thick and condensed. Presumably, your strength is extraordinary. City Lord, you're being too polite." Mo Tiange cautiously looked at him. This young man was different from Elder Liang. Elder Liang's devil aura was so thick that it was visible to the naked eye, but this young man's devil aura was so faint that it was almost undetectable. After the young man finished examining them, he pointed at them and asked with a smile, "This is Qin Wei, little friend Qin, and this is little friend Tian Can. Am I right?" Elder Liang had already informed them of their identities through a summoning talisman. Their appearances and names were exactly the same, so this young man naturally recognized them correctly. Mo Tiange smiled slightly. Nia Wushang didn't like to talk, so she communicated on her behalf. "Yes." The young man nodded and introduced himself. "I'm Starfall City's city lord. My surname is Mei and my name is Feng." "So it's City Lord Mei. I've heard a lot about you." Mo Tiange's expression was completely calm. Upon seeing this, City Lord Mei laughed and said, "All right, let's not talk about these empty courtesies. Since little friend Qin asked me why I invited you, you must be an impatient person. How about we get straight to the point?" Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang naturally didn't have any objections. They were both impatient people who treated empty courtesies, so they immediately nodded and said, "City Lord May, please speak." City Lord May said with a smile, "Presumably, that elder of mine has already mentioned it to you too, right? The matter is simple. I want to ask you two to help me with something. If you succeed, I'll reward you handsomely." Elder Liang had already mentioned this before. Mo Tiange said, "This. Juniors don't understand. With City Lord May's cultivation level and the elders of Starfall City, your strength is quite extraordinary. What kind of matter do you need help from outsiders like us? Even if you want to help, wouldn't City Lord May asking some nascent soul seniors be more helpful than us?" Hee hee. City Lord May chuckled and said, "I don't blame little friend Qin for having such a thought. This matter is indeed puzzling. Let me put it this way. The matter I want to do doesn't require a high cultivation level, and it doesn't require too many people. What I need is to ensure our survival and have as many opportunities as possible. That's why I'm asking all the core formation cultivators who have appeared in Starfall City to help me." It didn't require a high cultivation level, so he didn't need to invite nascent soul cultivators because the price of inviting a nascent soul cultivator was also very high. It didn't require too many people, so even if he was a city lord with countless subordinates, he wouldn't be able to use them. Mo Tiange somewhat understood. However, City Lord May just said it needed to ensure their survival. Could it be that this matter was very dangerous? "City Lord May, please tell us the truth. We can't agree to your request." City Lord May seemed to have a good temperament. After Mo Tiange said that, he thought for a moment then said slowly, "This matter. I'll have to explain it to you first. Little friends, in your opinion, how long is my lifespan?" This question wasn't easy to answer. Mo Tiange could see that although City Lord May look like a teenager, his lifespan was more than half over. However, some cultivators didn't like it when others called them old, especially when they looked young. Mo Tiange didn't know whether City Lord May had this taboo or not. City Lord May seemed to see their dilemma and said kindly, "Little friends, please speak frankly. There's no need to worry." Mo Tiange smiled and said, "That being the case, City Lord May, please forgive me for speaking bluntly. The City Lord should be between 500 to 800 years old, right?" Nia Wushang also nodded in agreement. City Lord May smiled and nodded. "Correct. Little friends, you have good eyes. I formed my nascent soul when I was 500 years old. It's already been 300 years since then, so I'm 800 years old. The reason why I've maintained my youthful appearance is because I mistakenly ate a longevity fruit when I was young, causing my appearance to remain at the age of 15 for hundreds of years." Longevity fruit. Mo Tiange was a bit surprised. The longevity fruit was one of the main ingredients for longevity pills. If eaten alone, it could also increase one's lifespan, but it would trigger other effects. It seemed City Lord May was young and ignorant that caused her to suffer. City Lord May heaved a long sigh and said, "I've lived for 800 years. Since I was 15, I've always maintained this appearance. In the beginning, I was complacent because I thought I could save a lot of look-preserving pills compared to other people. But later, as I grew older, I realized that growing older was also a fortunate thing. This lord. When this lord was young, I once had someone I loved, but that woman rejected me in the end because of my immature appearance." Mo Tiange saw that City Lord May's face was full of disappointment and frustration. Presumably, he was very fond of that woman in the past. 15 years old was indeed an awkward age. At this age, a man would start to understand the affairs of the heart, but he still hadn't fully grown up and couldn't be considered a man. No woman in this world would wish for their lover to remain at the age of 15 forever. At this age, he still didn't have broad shoulders. Moreover, even if she maintained her youthful appearance, being with him would be like being with her younger brother. After sighing for a while, City Lord May continued, "This matter is one of the greatest regrets of my life. Although my beloved has already turned into dust, I still can't let go of it. In the past 800 years, I've tried my best to restore my appearance, but unfortunately, I've never succeeded. In ancient records, there was a kind of spiritual fruit called the heavenly god fruit. This fruit wasn't too miraculous in terms of cultivation, but it could remove the poison caused by eating spiritual plants. I've been searching for it for several hundred years, but I've never seen it. It's as if this fruit has disappeared for a very long time and no longer exists in this world. However, a few days ago, I made a discovery." At this point, City Lord May's eyes shone with hope. "A few days ago, I discovered a secret place on Mount Starfall. I don't know its origin, but it might be an ancient ruin. Once you enter the ruins, you'll be given a test. If you pass the test, you'll be rewarded with a heavenly god fruit." Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang were stunned. If what City Lord May said was true, it was no wonder that so many core formation cultivators hadn't left. This kind of secret place was hard to find. If City Lord May gave them the opportunity to enter, even if they couldn't obtain the heavenly god fruit, they would still have a chance to obtain other treasures. This was a rare opportunity. Chapter 395. In front of a nascent soul cultivator, it wasn't convenient for the two of them to use voice transmissions. However, this was a serious matter, so they couldn't make a decision in a short time. Both Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang remained silent as they pondered. City Lord May wasn't in a hurry. She just sat there and watched them with a smile. Mo Tiange pondered for a while and felt it was better to discuss this matter first. She didn't have much desire for treasures, and she didn't know the ins and outs of this mysterious place. It was too risky to casually enter an ancient secret place. Who knew if there were any inside stories? As for Nia Wushang, she was trustworthy and very strong. If the two of them joined hands, it would be safer. With this thought in mind, she said, "City Lord May, Jr. just passed by Starfall City this time and came to take a look. I've already made an appointment with a friend to meet in a few months. This, little friend Qin, rest assured," City Lord May said, "this matter will be over in a month at most. You can leave then." City Lord May, Nia Wushang continued to ask, "What's the inside story of this secret place you mentioned? Will it be life-threatening? You can get a reward if you pass, but what if you can't? In addition, if you find the heavenly god fruit, what will you give in exchange? If you can't find it, what will you do?" Mo Tiange's previous words were evasive. It seemed she didn't really want to go to this secret place, but Nia Wushang's series of questions showed that she was seriously considering the feasibility of entering this secret place. City Lord May was overjoyed and said, "As long as you agree to go to this secret place, I'll do my best to help you. If you find the heavenly god fruit, I'm willing to give you a spiritual treasure in exchange. You can ask for it. If you don't, you can also choose some from my collection. As for this secret place, I can tell you the truth. This place should be a test left behind from the distant past era. Its mechanisms won't endanger your lives. Of course, if you enter with others, you must be careful of others plotting against you." Nia Wushang thought for a while then asked, "City Lord, did you invite so many core formation fellow Taoists because this secret place is only for core formation cultivators? Moreover, each person can only enter once." "Correct," City Lord May said, "after I discovered this secret place, I already went inside to explore. I am a nascent soul cultivator, so I triggered the test of the nascent soul stage. In ancient times, the magical powers of the nascent soul cultivators were exceedingly powerful. How could the cultivators of today compare? Without a doubt, I didn't pass. Later on, he ordered his subordinates to send in cultivators of various cultivation levels to explore, but all of them failed. Actually, a foundation building cultivator can also enter, and the power of the explosion won't be too strong. However, the rewards for a foundation building cultivator aren't very rich, and there's no heavenly god fruit either. I have no choice but to ask the core formation cultivators passing by Descending Star City for help. Mo Tiange wrinkled her brows and asked, City Lord Mei, didn't this matter leak out? If it's an ancient mystic land, I'm sure many fellow Taoists would be willing to go. City Lord Mei hesitated for a moment before calmly replying, I've also thought about this matter. Many core formation cultivators have visited recently, and they aren't foundation establishment cultivators that can be casually dealt with. This news won't be able to be concealed for long. My Descending Star City isn't big and isn't considered powerful among the 7 minor demon regions of the Northern Unicorn Kingdom. If the other demon regions, or the major sects of the East Tang or South Zhou Kingdom wish to enter this secret place, I won't be able to stop them. By then, it's still unknown if we can exchange for the God of Heaven fruit from their hands. That's why I have to hurry up and get my hands on the Heavenly God fruit while they haven't decided yet. Mo Tiange nodded in agreement. Although the Heavenly God fruit didn't have any miraculous effects, it was an ancient item after all. If it could detoxify the remaining poison in spiritual plants, those major sects would most likely want to preserve it. Little friends, City Lord Mei said, I can't let you have a look at my treasures right now, but I can guarantee that they're definitely treasures that you core formation cultivators yearn for even in your dreams. As long as you agree to enter and give it a try, even if you can't obtain the Heavenly God fruit, I'll still give you some benefits. For core formation cultivators, the treasures of a nascent soul cultivator were naturally rare treasures. Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang didn't doubt this point. Junior naturally believes City Lord Mei, Nia Wushang said, however, it'll be very difficult to pass this secret place, right? Of course, City Lord Mei admitted, you have to be mentally prepared. This is an ancient mystic land, and the test for core formation cultivators is very difficult. You might not even be able to pass the first test. Mo Tiange was aware of this point. Before she formed her gold core, Xianqing School discovered that there was a hidden 10,000 laws of nature formation in Mount Taikang. It was similar to this mystic land and was also an ancient trial ground. City Lord Mei wasn't lying. Once City Lord Mei finished speaking, Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang exchanged glances. They saw the same message in each other's eyes. Mo Tiange tacitly understood. She turned towards City Lord Mei and said with a smile, this matter is very important. Junior has to think about it. I wonder, oh, of course, City Lord Mei said, little friend, you can stay in the manor for the time being and think about it carefully. Nia Wushang also said, Junior too. I hope City Lord Mei can make things easier for us. Of course. City Lord Mei smiled. If the two of you have decided, I'll have someone take you to rest. What do you think? That's great. Thank you for your trouble, City Lord. City Lord Mei clapped her hands to summon a maid and ordered, take these two little friends to Fenghe Courtyard. Treat them well and make sure they're satisfied. The maid bowed. Yes, City Lord. She then respectfully saluted the two of them and said, Seniors, please follow me. Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang stood up, cupped their fists towards City Lord Mei and followed the maid out. A moment later, the maid led the two of them into a courtyard. The courtyard was small and exquisite. It had winding corridors, a clear pond, and pink lotuses in the pond, which made it look like a beautiful pavilion. In the courtyard's small hall, there was a plaque with 4 words, Crooked Courtyard, Fenghe Courtyard. Mo Tiange thought to herself. She really couldn't tell that this City Lord Mei was actually an elegant person. Moreover, there were restrictions laid in the courtyard, which blocked the devil aura, making the small courtyard look exceptionally elegant. After leading the two of them into the courtyard, the maid said, "This is Fenghe Courtyard. Both of you are seniors cultivating, so it's very suitable for you to stay here. This is the east wing, and this is the west wing. Seniors can choose whichever one you want to stay in. I'll send someone to serve you later." While Mo Tiange was still looking around, Nia Wushang said, "There's no need to serve us. We like peace and quiet the most. If there's anything, just call us. If there's nothing, there's no need to disturb us." Yes. This request was very normal for cultivators, so the maid bent her knees and respectfully retreated. Once the maid left the courtyard, the two of them immediately took action. They checked the surroundings to see if there were any prying restrictions. Once they confirmed there were none, Mo Tiange made a slight move, laying a restriction that could block divine sense. Then she and Nia Wushang sat by the pond. "Fellow Daoist Nia, what do you think?" Mo Tiange asked first. She could tell Nia Wushang was inclined to go to the secret place, but she didn't know what she was planning. "I think we can give it a try," Nia Wushang said as expected. She took off her bamboo hat and pulled down her scarf to get some fresh air. Then, she suddenly asked an unrelated question, "Do you think City Lord Mei saw through my disguise?" Mo Tiange was stunned. "I don't know. He's a nascent soul cultivator, so it's not strange for him to see through you. Besides, since he didn't say anything, it means he doesn't care. What does it matter if you're pretending or not?" "You're right." Nia Wushang sighed and said, "I'm most afraid of meeting high-level cultivators. If they're curious, they can just sweep me with their divine sense, and I won't be able to hide any secrets." At the very least, the secret that she was a woman couldn't be concealed. Mo Tiange was distressed. If she didn't have the spirit-concealing pendant, she would be in even more danger than Nia Wushang. Besides, even if she had the spirit-concealing pendant, it wasn't completely foolproof. For example, Ling Yunhe and Black Moon Devil Monarch used other methods to detect that she was concealing her cultivation level. After all, there aren't many high-level cultivators. Besides, they wouldn't casually sweep around with their divine sense for no reason. Even if they found out, it had nothing to do with them, so they wouldn't say anything. "Yeah, that's good." Nia Wushang wiped her face, then continued with the original topic. "Why do I see that you don't seem very interested? If what City Lord Mei said is true, this is a rare opportunity." Mo Tiange smiled. "You got a lot of treasures from your master, right? Do you still need to be tempted by what City Lord Mei said?" Nia Wushang was stunned. She shrugged helplessly and said, "Yes, when I defected, I practically swept away all of Master's belongings outside. In any case, I've already done it. Even if I didn't take anything, he still wouldn't let me off if he caught me, so I might as well do it a bit more straightforwardly. However, the primordial devil aura in my body hasn't been resolved. This City Lord Mei is a cultivator of the devil path, so maybe there are one or two related treasures in his collection. It'd be good if I could get my hands on them." What she said made sense. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment, then said with a smile, "You're saying this kind of thing to me. Aren't you afraid I'll be greedy?" Nia Wushang cast a glance at her, but she didn't seem to care at all. "If it was before, I really would have been afraid, but now, I'm not. You're someone with great ambitions. If you want to achieve Tao and become an immortal, you can't relax your mental state. How could you neglect your roots and pursue trifles?" She then said with a smile, "Besides, although you look smart and calm, you're actually a bit pedantic inside. If others offend you, you won't be polite, but if they're polite, you'll also be somewhat polite. To deal with people like you have to be so good that you can't let go of your feelings, right?" Mo Tiange stared at the sky, speechless. Ling Yun had told her that, and now even Nia Wushang said the same thing. Was her personality that obvious? However, this wasn't necessarily a bad thing. It was precisely because they saw through her personality that Ling Yunhe and Nia Wushang dared to trust her. In the cultivation world, it was quite rare to have someone you could trust. Thinking up to this point, Mo Tiange sighed. Alas, if you want to achieve Tao and become an immortal, you'll have more restrictions than others. Of course. Nia Wushang said without hesitation, if you want more, you have to pay more. This is a very fair thing. Mo Tiange also understood this. However, judging from Nia Wushang's tone, she seemed to have made up her mind to walk on the path to becoming an immortal. This was actually a good thing. In the future, she would have someone to talk to about this matter with. When she was in the Celestial Pole, among the people who had a good relationship with her, Luo Fengxue regained her power, Yi Jingwen liked to fight, and although Qin Shi had a firm Tao heart like her, his realm was higher than hers, so it was usually Qin Shi who gave her pointers instead of discussing things with her. In fact, the so-called Tao heart will become natural once it's cultivated to a certain realm. From this aspect, it's not necessarily painful because at that time, it'll already become a person's heart. Just like you now? Nia Wushang asked. I've always felt that you don't seem to have the common greed of cultivators. Is it because you're restricted too much that this kind of desire will naturally disappear? About that. Chapter 396. The two of them chatted for a while, straying far from the topic. In the end, they reluctantly said they'd think about it for 2 days since this matter wasn't urgent. Then they began to divide the loot. Although they didn't get anything good from their trip to Carefree Valley, Ling Yunhe gave Tianji Qian and Ling Yunfei's Qianquan bags to them after they betrayed them and were killed at the last moment to show their gratitude. Both of them were disciples of big sects and were quite rich, so Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang benefited a lot. The two of them discussed and decided to divide spirit stones, spiritual pills, and some magic weapons and ancient books they needed. Mo Tiange naturally chose Tianji Qin. Not to mention his character, his attainments and formations were indeed extraordinary. If it weren't for the fact that he had no expertise other than formations, he would be a very difficult opponent. Unfortunately, perhaps because he was used to standing behind Ling Yunhe, he didn't have any means to fight. After dividing the loot, the two of them went to study cultivation techniques and meditate. 2 days later, when they had just regained their spirits, someone asked to see them outside the courtyard. They thought it was City Lord Mei, but when they asked, it was another cultivator invited by City Lord Mei. Nia Wushang was inclined to agree to City Lord Mei's request, while Mo Tiange was indifferent. However, both of them thought it was better not to jump to conclusions. After all, they only heard about this matter from City Lord Mei and knew very little about it. Now that another cultivator came to their door, it was good. Fellow Taoists, nice to meet you. Mo Tiange blinked and said in surprise, Fellow Taoist Yong, fellow Taoist Zhou, it's you. These two people were Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingruo, whom she met once in Sky Snow City. Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingruo finally recognized her and looked surprised. You're fellow Taoist Qin. Mo Tiange nodded at them and said with a smile, I didn't expect we'd meet again in Starfall City so soon after we parted in Sky Snow City. Fellow Taoists and I are really fated. Exactly. Qiu Qingruo answered first and looked at Nia Wushang curiously. Fellow Taoist Qin, this is my friend. His nickname is Tian Kan, Mo Tiange introduced. With a flat attitude, Nia Wushang nodded at them and said, Nice to meet you. So it's Taoist Tian Kan. Upon hearing Mo Tiange's introduction, Qiu Qingruo looked a bit disappointed, but he concealed it very well and immediately greeted her enthusiastically. Yong Ryu's attitude, on the other hand, was much more normal. She smiled and nodded at Nia Wushang in greeting. She was neither rude nor overly enthusiastic. Mo Tiange felt both helpless and amused. This Qiu Qingruo still hadn't changed a bit. He still guarded against other women as if they were thieves. Fortunately, Nia Wushang was now dressed as a man. Otherwise, she would have definitely dragged Yong Ryu back, right? Fellow Taoist Tian Can, I met these two Taoists once in Heavenly Snow City. This is fellow Taoist Yong, and this is fellow Taoist Zhou. The two of them are cultivators from one of Eastern Tang's 5 great sects, the Dawning Pill sect. After they finished greeting each other, Mo Tiange politely invited Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingruo into the hall. Fellow Taoist Qin, what a coincidence. You also came to Descending Star City? Qiu Qingruo asked right after they sat down. Mo Tiange smiled and answered, after we parted ways that day, I happened to meet fellow Taoist Tian Can in Heavenly Snow City. We were very happy to meet again in a foreign place, so we decided to travel together. Originally, we had some matters to take care of in the vicinity, but unexpectedly, we were invited by the city lord as soon as we entered Descending Star City. May I know what happened to the two of you? We're more or less the same, Yong Ryu said. Junior Marshall's sister and I came here to travel, so we didn't have a specific purpose. We came all the way from Heavenly Snow City to Descending Star City without thinking too much. Right after we entered Descending Star City, we were invited to the City Lord's mansion by Castellan May. Mo Tiange's gaze changed. That means we came to the City Lord's mansion for the same reason. That should be correct. Once she finished speaking, the four of them exchanged glances with each other. Soon after, Mo Tiange smiled and said, fellow Taoists, after we parted ways in Sky Snow City, we met again in Starfall City. Moreover, we're also gathered together because of one matter, it can be considered fate. Moreover, we're both Tao cultivators, so we're a bit closer than other people. There are some things I have to say frankly. She paused for a moment. Seeing that Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingruo were smiling and didn't seem to have any objections, she directly asked, fellow Taoists, what do you think about Castellan May's invitation? Have you agreed? Once Mo Tiange finished speaking, Qiu Qingruo immediately turned to look at Yong Ryu. Although she controlled everything, she always put Yong Ryu first when it came to official matters. Yong Ryu pondered for a while, then looked at Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang. She said, fellow Taoist Qin is so frank, so I can't hide it from you. Yes, Junior Marshall's sister and I have already agreed to Castellan May's request. Nia Wushang frowned and said, fellow Taoists, aren't you afraid there's more to this? Upon hearing this question, Qiu Qingruo covered her mouth and smiled. Fellow Taoist Tian Can, you and fellow Taoist Qin really have a telepathic connection. Your cautiousness is really similar. The ridicule in his words was very obvious. Mo Tiange felt helpless and said sternly, fellow Taoist Zhou, in fact, I already have a Tao companion. Although you were just joking, please don't say such things in the future. Qiu Qingruo was a bit surprised, but soon after, her expression turned serious and she solemnly saluted. I'm sorry, I offended you before. I hope fellow Taoist Qin won't take it to heart. Mo Tiange smiled and waved her hand, indicating she didn't mind. It was better to say things like this so this woman wouldn't always treat her as an imaginary enemy and try every possible way to remind her senior martial brother if he said one or two more words to him. Usually, it was fine, but when they were talking about official matters, this kind of behavior was really an eyesore. Fellow Taoists, aren't you afraid there's more to what Castellan May said? Nia Wushang asked again. Yong Ryu smiled and said, fellow Taoist Tian Can, no matter what, Junior Marshall's sister and I are disciples of a big cultivation group. Moreover, we're both core formation cultivators. We're not foundation building disciples whose cultivation groups won't care about us even if they disappear. Although Castellan May is the lord of a city, he can't afford to offend my Dontia sect. That being the case, what's there to be afraid of? Mo Tiange wasn't surprised by this answer. In the past few days, she discovered that Yunzhong cultivators were a lot bolder. As for the reason, it might be because cultivators from different paths lived together and lived in harmony for tens of thousands of years. After Yongryu finished speaking, she looked at Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang's expressions, then continued to say, "Fellow Taoists, you still haven't made up your mind? In fact, as long as what Castellan May said is true, it'll be beneficial to us. Let's not talk about what we can obtain, but ancient secret places are really hard to find nowadays. If we can go in and take a test, it'll also be very beneficial to our strength. Maybe we'll learn some ancient divine abilities and have a sudden epiphany. At that time, our cultivation levels will advance by leaps and bounds. That'll be a very good thing." Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang were both stunned. Yes, what Yongryu said was absolutely correct. This was the biggest benefit. They really didn't expect that Yunzhong cultivators would actually have this kind of broad-mindedness. They could see the essence at a glance. The significance of this kind of ancient secret place wasn't to obtain any visible benefits, but rather to experience ancient divine abilities and comprehend the mysteries of heaven and earth. What's wrong? Fellow Taoists, don't you think so? Yongryu asked again, since the two of them didn't speak. Mo Tiange heaved a long sigh, then looked at Yongryu and said sternly, "No, what fellow Taoist Yong said is very reasonable. For cultivators like us, this is indeed the biggest benefit." Yongryu's expression relaxed and she said with a smile, "That being the case, why are you still hesitating?" Mo Tiange didn't answer immediately. She looked at Yongryu, then at Qiu Qingruo, then asked, "Why do you want me and fellow Taoist Tiancan to agree so much? Does this matter have something to do with you too?" Qiu Qingruo smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Qin, don't misunderstand. It's just that Starfall City is a devil's domain, and most of the people who come here are devil cultivators. There aren't many Tao cultivators. Fellow Taoists must have heard that this secret place is a place for training. It won't endanger your life, but if someone tries to kill you from behind, you have to be on guard." "I see." Mo Tiange nodded. "So you want us to be your companions?" Yongryu nodded with a smile. "Yes. Junior Marshall's sister and I originally came here with this idea, but after meeting you two, we felt we didn't need to think too much about it. Although we've only met fellow Taoist Qin once, fellow Taoist Qin is much more trustworthy than others." "I have to thank you for your trust," Mo Tiange said with a smile. "But fellow Taoist Tiancan and I don't know much about this matter, so we can't answer you for now." "That's easy." Qiu Qingruo was very enthusiastic. "Senior Marshal brother and I have been here for several days, so we've more or less understood this matter. We can tell you too in detail." "Is that so?" This was good news. Mo Tiange said, "Then I'll have to trouble you, fellow Taoist Zhou." Yongryu and Qiu Qingruo then told them one by one. As it turned out, this kind of secret place wasn't very secretive in Yunzhong. Although there weren't many of them, most cultivation groups knew about one or two, and some of them were in their hands to train their disciples. Because of that, the core formation cultivators invited by City Lord May didn't suspect anything and stayed. They all knew this kind of secret place was hard to find. In a few days, it would be known by all cultivation groups. At that time, they would have to spend a lot of effort to enter the secret place. It would be better for them to help City Lord May's group this time. The sooner they entered the secret place, the more benefits they could obtain. As for that secret place, they also asked the core formation cultivators in Descending Stars City to learn more about it. Although it was difficult to pass, the mysteries of the divine abilities inside were obvious. There were even some secret techniques of the devil path inside. For devil cultivators, this was very attractive. Because in the Middle Ages, there were many cultivators and very few devil cultivators, so when an ancient secret place was discovered, it was usually cultivators who benefited the most. However, this ancient secret place actually had secret techniques of the devil path. This was really too rare. After spending most of the day explaining the matter, Yong-ryu asked again, "Fellow Taoists, this is all we've asked about. What do you think?" Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang glanced at each other then said, "Fellow Taoists, this is all we've asked about. What do you think? However, I still need to discuss this matter with fellow Taoist Tian Can. I'll give the two of you an answer after some time. How about it?" Yong-ryu smiled. "Of course. Since that's the case, Junior Marshal Sister and I will take our leave first. We don't have much time, so if you two fellow Taoists have made a decision, please reply as soon as possible." Chapter 397. After Yong-ryu and Chiu Qingruo left, Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang were silent for a long time. After a while, Nia Wushang suddenly asked, "Do you think they're trustworthy?" Mo Tiange shook her head. "I can't say for sure. I'm not familiar with them." Nia Wushang nodded, stroked her chin, and said, "Don't you think there's a big difference between Yunzhong and the Celestial Pole in some aspects?" Mo Tiange was also thinking about this a moment ago. "You're right. If cultivators in the Celestial Pole encountered such a good thing, they'd probably suspect this city Lord Mei has evil intentions, but cultivators in Yunzhong don't have that many concerns. Yes, they're not so wary of people, and their way of thinking is also much simpler." Nia Wushang thought for a long time and sighed. "I originally thought we could give it a try, but seeing the attitude of these Yunzhong cultivators, I feel a bit uneasy." Mo Tiange pondered. "But the problem is, even if we don't agree, will this city Lord Mei let us go?" The two of them looked at each other and shook their heads. Although City Lord Mei was polite to them before, they didn't think she'd simply let them go. Even if the atmosphere in Yunzhong and the Celestial Pole were somewhat different, strength was respected. This was the unchanging iron rule of this world. They were only core formation cultivators and didn't show any background, but they made a different choice from other cultivators, so it was hard to guarantee that City Lord Mei wouldn't be suspicious. The two of them thought for a long time but couldn't come up with a good solution. They were rich, so the so-called benefits weren't very attractive to them. However, Nia Wushang wanted to find a way to eliminate primordial devil aura, while Mo Tiange was quite tempted by the mysteries of the distant past era divine power Yong-ryu mentioned. However, they were born in the Celestial Pole and had rough experiences, so they were much more vigilant toward people than cultivators in Yunzhong. They really didn't dare to trust people so easily. "Let's go." After a long time, Nia Wushang said after some deliberation, "If we don't go, we obviously have no way out." Mo Tiange pondered while nodding slowly. The problem now wasn't whether they should go or not, but if they didn't go, they couldn't leave. They were in Descending Star City, and City Lord Mei was a nascent soul cultivator. Although they had nothing to fear among the core formation cultivators, they were not arrogant enough to think that they could defeat a nascent soul cultivator. Moreover, the other party had the geographical advantage. "Since we're going, are we going with those two?" Nia Wushang asked. Mo Tiange thought for a moment then said, "In terms of strength, we're a bit stronger than them. There's really nothing to be afraid of." "Yes." Yong-ryu and Chiu Qingruo were both in the early stage of the core formation realm. Even though they came from a big sept and were stronger than ordinary cultivators, they were still not ordinary cultivators. "Then it's decided." Mo Tiange stared at Nia Wushang. Nia Wushang nodded. "That'll do. If that's the case, we'll have to prepare well. If we notice anything amiss, we'll leave immediately. And Nya Wushang agreed. As long as they were out of Descending Star City, even if it was just out of the Chancellor's residence, they would have a chance to escape. With that settled, the two of them got busy. Mo Tiange went back to her room, laid a formation, then entered the virtual sky world to rest and reorganize. She prepared everything and took the 3 spiritual beasts with her. As for Nya Wushang, her hand was slightly injured, but it wouldn't affect her fighting too much. When the two of them finished preparing, Mo Tiange asked a maid to bring Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingruo over. Fellow Daoist Qin, fellow Daoist Tiancan. Once the two of them came in, Yong Ryu said with a smile, "Have the two of you made a decision?" "Yes." Mo Tiange smiled and invited the two of them to sit in the hall. "I've discussed it with fellow Daoist Tiancan. Since both of you think it's worth a try, we're also willing to go." "That's good." Yong Ryu looked happy and clapped her hands. "With 2 fellow Taoists accompanying us, we'll feel much more at ease." "Same to you." The 4 of them chatted for a while before Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingruo said goodbye and left to go back to prepare. Before leaving, Qiu Qingruo held Mo Tiange's hand very intimately and said, "Fellow Daoist Qin, it's rare for us core formation female cultivators to meet sisters in the same realm as us. What's even rarer is that we're both Dao cultivators, so we presumably have a lot of common topics to talk about. If there's a chance, let's talk more." Mo Tiange smiled and answered politely, "Fellow Daoist Qiu, if you want to talk, feel free to visit me or ask someone to send a message." Qiu Qingruo was very happy to hear her answer. He said a lot more before leaving with Yong Ryu. After watching their figures disappear, Nya Wushang leaned against the moon cave door with her arms crossed. She raised her chin at Mo Tiange and said with some disgust, "Why are you so polite to that woman?" "That woman?" Mo Tiange was stunned but soon smiled. "You mean Qiu Qingruo? Who else could it be?" Nya Wushang curled her lips. "I really don't understand. Does she really think her senior martial brother is loved by everyone? She's a cultivator, but she's acting like a secular woman, guarding against other women like a thief. That being the case, what's the point of her cultivating?" After talking for a long time, Mo Tiange imitated her and leaned against the moon cave door, staring at her with a faint smile on her face. Nya Wushang couldn't help but touch her face. It was nothing. She was still wearing a veil, so cultivators in the same realm as her wouldn't be able to see through her. This made Nya Wushang a bit nervous. "What's wrong?" Mo Tiange stroked her chin and revealed an enigmatic smile. "Why do you dislike her so much?" "Because." Nya Wushang took off her bamboo hat and pulled off the veil underneath, feeling a bit annoyed. "Maybe it's because she's jealous. She has such good qualifications, but she's putting her mind on this kind of unimportant thing." "It's simply a waste," Mo Tiange laughed and patted her forehead. "How do you know it's a waste for her to do this?" "Anyone with eyes can see it," Nya Wushang said gloomily. Mo Tiange looked at the sky then said, "In fact, if you think about it from another perspective, that fellow Daoist Yong doesn't seem like a stupid person. Why does he turn a blind eye to his junior martial sister's behavior?" Nya Wushang was stunned. "This. Maybe he doesn't care." "That's possible. But he obviously doesn't dislike it." Mo Tiange spread her hands. While looking at the veins on her palm, she said, "In other words, all of Qiu Qingruo's actions are in the hands of her senior martial brother, but that Yong Ryu is completely unaware of it. If it's not because he's particularly slow, then it's because he tacitly approves of his junior martial sister's actions." "So what?" "Nothing." Mo Tiange's gaze fell on Nya Wushang's face. She said faintly, "It's just that this is other people's lives. They themselves don't have any opinions about it, so why should we worry about them? Nia Wushang's expression gradually softened. After a long time, she finally nodded. You're right. It's their own business, it's not worthwhile for me to meddle in it. Mo Tiange smiled. Besides, do you like that fellow Daoist Yong? What are you thinking? Nia Wushang rolled her eyes at her. I don't like Qiu Qingruo, but it has nothing to do with her man. That's not what I meant, Mo Tiange said. Mo Tiange said, since both you and I don't like her, then Yong Ryu's conditions can't be considered too good. No matter what, Qiu Qingruo is a core formation female cultivator, and she's a disciple of a big cultivation group. Her cultivation level is pretty good, so presumably, her aptitude isn't bad either. She's also very beautiful. If she was a bit more utilitarian, she could have found a stronger Dao companion, but she didn't. From this point of view, don't you think she's more pleasing to the eye? Nia Wushang didn't say anything for a long time. Mo Tiange smiled. There's definitely something about Qiu Qingruo that we don't like, but that doesn't mean she's wasting her life. Judging from her age, she shouldn't be more than 300 years old. Even if her aptitude is good, advancing to the core formation realm before 300 years old is still not easy. We only see her pestering her senior martial brother from time to time, but we don't see her working hard. Nia Wushang's expression slowly softened. After a long time, she finally nodded softly. You're right. I'm too self-righteous. Mo Tiange shook her head. We cultivators can naturally do whatever we want. Sometimes, we don't need to know whether a person is good or not. Since we don't like them, we just don't get close to them. However, if we think too much, it'll be easy for us to look down on others. Nia Wushang rubbed her brows and muttered, turns out there are still so many things in this world that I don't understand. Seeing her like this, Mo Tiange couldn't help but laugh. I really can't tell you're actually several decades older than me. Judging from your appearance, you're practically ignorant about the world. Nia Wushang curled her lips. How could I have the chance? Mo Tiange was a bit curious when she heard this question. Right, I haven't asked you yet. How did you become Master Song Feng's disciple? Nia Wushang was silent for a long time. When Mo Tiange thought she wouldn't answer, she finally heard Nia Wushang's low and hoarse voice. My mother is his wife. Mo Tiange was stunned. She almost thought she heard wrong. She thought for a moment then said in disbelief, so you're saying, he's actually your father? No. Nia Wushang's expression was cold. I'm not his child. In other words, I'm a bastard child my mother secretly gave birth to. Mo Tiange wrinkled her brows. How could someone use such words to describe me and my mother? Nia Wushang saw her expression and smiled self-mockingly. Master has always said that about me since I was a child. Then. Mo Tiange hesitated for a moment then asked, what about your mother and your biological father? I don't know. They should be dead. Nia Wushang's tone was flat and indifferent. With Master's personality, my mother definitely wouldn't have survived after betraying him. As for that man, he also wouldn't have had a chance to live. I'm sorry, Mo Tiange said in a low voice. It's nothing. Nia Wushang shook her head and smiled bitterly. I should have told you that Master can't be considered human, so he couldn't have had children. I don't know why he married my mother, but I know what kind of inhuman life my mother lived with him. So I understand very well why my mother fell in love with another man and gave birth to me, although I hate her for giving birth to me, Nia Wushang said faintly. Ever since I was young, Master treated me like that. He beat and scolded me at every turn, calling me a bastard child, but he also taught me to cultivate and made me work for him. I don't know what kind of mentality he had. Maybe torturing me like that gave him the thrill of revenge. Then, do you miss your mother? Nia Wuxiang was dazed for a long time. After a long time, she smiled and said, before I was 10 years old, I think. I told you, Master was too successful. He completely educated me into the person he wanted me to be. I was afraid of him, hated him, but I had no choice but to rely on him. I dreamed of leaving him, but after I escaped, I almost couldn't survive. She smiled self-mockingly. Unfortunately, I still disappointed him in the end. I'll live, and I'll live better than him. Chapter 398. Mo Tiange heaved a long sigh and patted Nia Wuxiang's shoulder, speechless. She knew Nia Wuxiang must have a sad story, but she didn't expect it to be like this. The man who was supposed to be her father raised her, tortured her, and took revenge on her with his hatred for her mother. She never saw her mother, and she didn't even have the child's admiration for her. She lived for more than 100 years without freedom, hope, or even thoughts. What kind of life was that? Mo Tiange found it hard to imagine. If it was said that she once had a bit of ill feelings towards Nia Wuxiang, at this moment, it had already disappeared without a trace. It wasn't because she sympathized with her, but because even if Nia Wuxiang made her unhappy, it wasn't from her heart. She recalled Nia Wuxiang once said the reason she could advance so quickly was because Master Song Feng used primordial devil aura to open up her meridians. This primordial devil aura would flare up every once in a while, and when it flared up, she would wish she was dead. Was this also one of the methods of torture? Will your primordial devil aura flare up soon? Mo Tiange's concerned tone stunned Nia Wuxiang for a moment. She said, it hasn't flared up since I advanced to the middle stage of the core formation realm. I feel the spiritual aura during my advancement suppressed the primordial devil aura in my meridians, so it probably won't flare up in the near future. That's good. Nia Wuxiang looked at her, wanting to say something but hesitating. Mo Tiange asked curiously, what's wrong? Nia Wuxiang hesitated for a long time and finally asked, do you think of me as a friend? Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows and asked with a smile, otherwise, why would I go with you? Nia Wuxiang was silent for a long time. After a long time, Mo Tiange heard her sigh. I thought, a proud son of heaven like you wouldn't put people like me in your eyes and wouldn't understand, so that's how I look in Nia Wuxiang's eyes. Mo Tiange laughed and said, how did you know I was a proud son of heaven from the beginning? Nia Wuxiang was stunned and said, when I first saw you, you were only in the foundation building realm, but you were already Lord Daoist Jinghe's disciple. How could you not be? Mo Tiange sighed and said, what about before I built my foundation? I entered Xianqing school when I was 20 years old. At that time, I was already in the 10th layer of the aura refining realm. 20 years old and already at the 10th layer of Qi training. This kind of cultivation speed is considered outstanding among the elite disciples of the big sections. You're right, Mo Tiange said, but at that time, I was just a trash with 5 wasted spiritual roots. I had to rely on taking medicine to cultivate. She spoke very calmly, but Nia Wuxiang was astonished. How could that be possible? If you had such aptitude, how could Lord Daoist Jinghe have accepted you as his disciple? And how could you be so young? Mo Tiange chuckled and said, my aptitude is abnormal. Before Master accepted me as his disciple, everyone, including myself, thought I had a waste spiritual root. Oh. Nia Wuxiang didn't delve too deeply into it. The cultivation world was very mysterious, and there were always a lot of strange things. Even though she was a core formation cultivator, she still couldn't completely understand them. With this thought in mind, she asked, if that's the case, how did you spend those 20 years? Mo Tiange looked down at her hands and slowly began to talk about her past. I was born in the secular world. Before I was 7 years old, I was just an ordinary village girl. She briefly recounted her experiences as a teenager and hid the parts that were inconvenient to tell others. By the time she finished, almost an hour had already passed. After listening to her, Nia Wushang didn't say anything for a long time. No one knew what she was thinking. After a while, she finally sighed and said, "No wonder. No wonder you're so different from those disciples from big cultivation groups. There are even some places that I feel are very familiar." Mo Tiange smiled. I didn't expect that the one favored by the heavens in my eyes would also have this kind of experience. Nia Wushang stared at her and said earnestly, "I really didn't expect it. I thought your life was smooth sailing. This kind of thinking wasn't strange." People who knew her identity and saw that she had an outstanding cultivation level at such a young age would most likely have this kind of thinking. In fact, those years of wandering from place to place were only a few short years in her long life of cultivation. The longer she cultivated, the less it was worth mentioning. However, the marks left on her life were much heavier than those several decades of smooth sailing. In the past, she couldn't get anything, so now that she got something, she knew how to cherish it. The important people in her life left one by one, so her heart gradually became stronger and she could calmly face those storms. Compared to those truly favored by the heavens, she experienced more life and death, separation, loss, and injustice, so she could be more open-minded when facing worldly affairs. That's why I said that in places you can't see, others are also experiencing the same life as you and growing up, even if that person seems very annoying. Why do you look like that? Mo Tiange touched her face. Why do you look like that? Mo Tiange touched her face. Nia Wushang sighed and looked up at the sky. I really underestimated other cultivators. I always thought my experience was complicated and my understanding was different from others, but I never thought that other people's experience might be even more complicated. Mo Tiange couldn't help but laugh. I'm not as unlucky as you. Although I lost my parents when I was young, I didn't lack people who loved me. That's what you said, but I didn't think as clearly as you did. Nia Wushang looked down at her hand. The injury on her left hand hadn't healed yet, and there were still black traces where the black water corroded. She wrapped her wound again, clenched her fist, looked up and said, "After this matter is over, I've decided to travel around and experience the life of some ordinary cultivators. What about you? Do you want to go with me?" Mo Tiange pondered for a while then said, "Let's talk about it later. I can't decide right now." She came to Yunzhong to travel, but she had a more important purpose. She could only be sure about this after she met Ling Yunhe. Nia Wushang didn't feel disappointed. She said with a smile, "Then let's talk about it later. At the very least, before we return to Sky Snow City, we can still do things together, right?" "Of course," Mo Tiange answered with a smile. Nia Wushang seemed to be a trustworthy person with extraordinary strength, so it would be a pleasure to be her companion. After the two of them finished talking, they asked a maid to inform City Lord Mei. In just a moment, City Lord Mei sent someone to invite them over. Little friends. City Lord Mei walked in with a smile in the same small hall where they first met. Both Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang stood up and saluted. City Lord Mei. City Lord Mei smiled. With one hand clasped behind her back, she gestured for them to sit down. This gesture was very mature, but he looked like a teenager and hadn't grown up yet, so it looked very uncoordinated. City Lord Mei sat on the host's seat and ordered someone to serve tea. She then said with a smile, "I heard you two agreed to my request. I'm very happy." Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows. "I heard there are many core formation cultivators here. Why does City Lord Mei care so much about us?" City Lord Mei looked at them then pointed at her own head and said with a smile, "Intuition. Intuition. Nia Wushang was confused. Hee. City Lord May's gaze fell on her. Her attitude was amiable. Fellow Daoist Tian Can, as a nascent soul cultivator, you naturally have some wonderful divine abilities. It's like sensing fate. Mo Tiange said with a smile, I wonder what Lord May sensed. Could it be that you sensed we could pass the test? That's not it. Sensing isn't prophecy, City Lord May said with a smile. It's just that based on your words and actions, as well as my experience, I feel you too have a higher chance of passing the test this time. A nascent soul cultivator's vision was extraordinary. With just a cursory glance, she could already see that Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang's strength wasn't ordinary and that their chances of passing the test were slightly higher than those cultivators with ordinary strength. City Lord May's gaze swept over Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang before she said with a smile, from what I can see, your cultivation levels are extraordinary, your spiritual treasures aren't bad, and you don't look very old. Presumably, you have a master, right? Although there was no lack of self-reliant examples in the cultivation world, having a master was certainly much easier than individual cultivators. Most individual cultivators were low-level cultivators because their aptitudes were poor and foundation-building pills were hard to come by. Very few of them could advance to the foundation-building realm, and only 1 in 10,000 could form their gold core. Their chances were much lower than those of cultivation group disciples. Because cultivation wasn't easy, individual cultivators mostly looked old and experienced, even if they looked young. However, Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang weren't like this. Whether it was their appearance or their bearing, they didn't look like individual cultivators at first glance. Upon hearing this question, Mo Tiange only showed a faint smile and said, Junior indeed has a master, but it's inconvenient for me to say it. I hope Senior can forgive me. Nia Wushang said, I also have a master. City Lord May smiled and said, it seems you two young friends have extraordinary identities. I wasn't wrong about you. He paused for a moment then continued, since that's the case, I'll arrange for you two to enter the secret area to train together. City Lord May, Mo Tiange asked, can we enter the trial at any time? City Lord May shook her head and said, according to reason, the trial can be opened at any time. However, I won't hide this from you two. After discovering this secret area, I gathered the strength of all the core formation cultivators in Descending Stars City and laid a restriction to ensure that this place won't be discovered by outsiders for a short period of time. Opening this restriction isn't an easy matter, so I wanted to wait until the number of core formation cultivators reached a certain number before opening it. City Lord May's words were reasonable, so Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang both nodded. Then, when will City Lord May decide to open it? City Lord May said, if you two young friends decide to join, there will be more than 10 people. It can be opened in 2 or 3 days. All right. If you decide when to open it, I'll have to ask City Lord May to inform me. That's natural. City Lord May stood up and said, in a moment, I'll have Elder Liang explain in detail the matters you need to pay attention to. I hope you two can prepare well in the next few days. Of course. Since the master seemed to want to see them off, Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang both stood up. That being the case, we'll take our leave first. City Lord May smiled and said, young friends, please do as you wish. The two of them cupped their hands and bowed to City Lord May again, then left the small hall. Under the guidance of a maid, they returned to Fenghe Courtyard. When they entered Fenghe Courtyard and confirmed that no one could spy on them, Nia Wushang impatiently asked, do you think there's a problem? It's hard to say. Mo Tiange wrinkled her brows. More than 10 core formation cultivators. It's too chaotic. He also reminded us that although this trial doesn't require our lives, other people can mount sneak attacks on us. I think we have to be careful with every step we take. Chapter 399. After a while, Elder Liang indeed came to Fenghe courtyard. He explained in detail the obstacles they might encounter in the trial, provided some information, and gave each of them a puppet-shaped magic weapon before leaving. After seeing Elder Liang off, Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang played with a puppet each and didn't say anything for a long time. After a long time, Nia Wushang put down the puppet in her hand and said, "They're quite well prepared." The puppet was only the size of a palm, but it was very delicate. There was a faint aura on it, but it wasn't devil aura or spiritual aura. Mo Tiange couldn't tell what it was. However, it was indeed a very good magic weapon. Elder Liang said the secret place was in Mount Starfall, and there were some poisonous creatures around it that would produce miasma. With this puppet, they could avoid the miasma and save spiritual aura. Yes. Mo Tiange looked at the puppet in her hand and frowned. Are we being too sensitive? The two of them were lost in thought. In fact, there was nothing particularly unreasonable about City Lord May's behavior. It was just that they were used to thinking from the negative side, so they felt there was no reason for such a good thing to happen to them. An ancient secret place invited by a nascent soul cultivator, and there was no danger to their lives. In the celestial pole, how could such a good thing be known to outsiders? Mo Tiange felt she was being too suspicious. This was Yunzhong, not the celestial pole. How could she know this kind of thing wasn't very common in Yunzhong? Besides, weren't those dozen or so core formation cultivators unsuspicious? Judging from Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingruo's behavior, Mo Tiange felt there was nothing suspicious about City Lord May's behavior. After pondering for a while, Mo Tiange said, "Let's do it as we see fit. Didn't we talk to Yong Ryu and the others? We'll act together with them. If something goes wrong, we can use their behavior as a reference." Nia Wushang agreed. In any case, she couldn't figure out what to do about this matter, so she'd do it this way. Several days later, a maid came to Fenghe courtyard to invite them. This time, they didn't meet in the small hall where they met City Lord May, but in the main hall of the City Lord's mansion. Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang finally met other cultivators. At first glance, there were a total of 15 cultivators gathered here. 10 of them were devil cultivators. Aside from the two of them, there were righteous Dao cultivators, Yong Ru, Yu Qiu, and Qing Ruo. There was also an extremely reclusive green-robed swordsman. This person's cultivation was at the middle stage of core formation. He carried a long sword on his back that was faintly glowing. He had a very thin face and expressionlessly sat in the corner without saying a single word. Upon seeing Mo Tiange staring at that person, Qiu Qingruo approached her and whispered, "Fellow Daoist Qin, Senior Martial Brother and I have been in contact with this person. He seems to be very wary of outsiders and refused our proposal." "Is that so?" Mo Tiange raised her brows. There were more than a dozen cultivators, most of whom were devil cultivators, but this person didn't want to travel with Yong Ryu. Was it because of his eccentric personality, or because he was very confident in himself? As if sensing that someone was looking at him, the man turned his head, glanced at them, and nodded stiffly. He then turned his head back and continued to stare straight ahead expressionlessly. The four of them were somewhat speechless. Even Nia Wushang thought this person looked too aloof. It seemed he really didn't like to interact with others. "Forget it," Mo Tiange said, "maybe this fellow Daoist really has an eccentric personality and doesn't like to interact with others." "Fellow Daoist Qin is right," Yong Ryu said, "since he doesn't want to travel with us, there's nothing we can do." The other three nodded and withdrew their gazes. "Fellow Daoist Qin." Qiu Qingruo looked at Mo Tiange and said with a smile, "It's been several days since we last met. Is the medicinal pill you wanted to concoct done?" Mo Tiange smiled. "It's done. If fellow Daoist Qiu doesn't have anything else to do, you can help me evaluate it." Chiu Qingruo waved his hand repeatedly. I only have a rough understanding of the Tao of pill concocting, so I don't dare to evaluate it. I just want to see it for myself. Last time, when they were chatting, Chiu Qingruo accidentally learned that Mo Tiange also knew the Tao of pill concocting. He was very happy and said he also liked pill concocting very much, so he wanted to ask her for advice and so on. Although Mo Tiange didn't like to be close to people, she wouldn't refuse if others treated her kindly, so she agreed. Yong Ryu looked at the two of them with a smile and said, Junior martial sister, you stay here with fellow Daoist Qin. I'll go to the side with fellow Daoist Tiancan and talk. We'll come back when City Lord May arrives. Alright, senior martial brother, you can go. Chiu Qingruo smiled at him, pulled Mo Tiange's hand, and sat down affectionately. Yong Ryu turned to Nia Wushang and said, fellow Daoist Tiancan, they can talk. Let's go over there and talk. Nia Wushang saw Mo Tiange nodding softly at her, so she said, all right. She was now a man, so it wasn't good for her to stay here confidently. Besides, she might gain something by talking to Yong Ryu alone. Ever since he knew Mo Tiange already had a Dao companion, Chiu Qingruo's attitude became a lot more natural. Not only was he no longer guarded against her, but he also treated her very intimately. Mo Tiange felt that although Chiu Qingruo wasn't the same kind of person as her, her current behavior wasn't hateful. If she maintained this attitude, it wouldn't be a problem for them to befriend each other. After all, there were thousands of people in this world. How could she not befriend others just because they had different ideas? Even among friends, people had to seek common ground while reserving differences, tolerate disagreements with others, adjust their own pace, and look for things they liked about each other. Mo Tiange was startled when she realized she was thinking about this problem. She realized she seemed to have been thinking about the word friend a lot lately. Could it be that the better she got along with Nia Wushang, the more she felt she could have a few more friends? This wasn't impossible. In the past 100 years, she'd always been relatively unsociable. Aside from people like Luo Fengxue and Yi Jingwen who took the initiative to treat her, she never thought about making friends with others. In the past, she was busy cultivating and her cultivation level wasn't high enough, so she didn't dare to easily make friends. But now that she was a core formation cultivator, she didn't need to be like that. Fellow Daoist Qin. Upon hearing Chiu Qingruo's voice, Mo Tiange regained her train of thought. She said apologetically, I'm sorry, I thought of a problem, so, Chiu Qingruo showed an understanding expression. He moved closer to her and asked, fellow Daoist Qin. Are you thinking about your husband? Mo Tiange was stunned, but she didn't deny it. Although she wasn't thinking about Qin Shi just now, she couldn't help but think about him every few days. On Demonic Mountain, she and Qin Shi made a blood oath to each other. Ever since they parted, she could sense Qin Shi's condition was very stable, so she wasn't too worried. Presumably, he was still in closed-door meditation, right? Upon seeing her expression, Chiu Qingruo covered her mouth and smiled. He then asked curiously, I see fellow Daoist Qin's way of doing things is very natural and magnanimous. You really don't look like someone trapped in love. I wonder what kind of person your husband is to be able to make you fall in love with him. This question startled Mo Tiange. What kind of person was Qin Shi? How could he be explained in a few words? The more she spent time with him, the more she felt he was good. But it was inconvenient for her to talk about those good qualities to outsiders. He is a very considerate person. Although he doesn't like to talk, he cares about people in his heart. When I'm with him, I feel like I'm cherished and valued. Upon seeing Mo Tiange's smiling expression, Chiu Qingruo seemed to be thinking about something. It seems you love your husband very much. Mo Tiange looked at him, puzzled. Fellow Daoist Chiu, how can you tell? Chiu Qingruo said, your expression can't deceive anyone. Thinking about him makes you feel very happy and happy. Mo Tiange recalled her mood just now and couldn't help but smile. Indeed, even just thinking about him made her feel very happy. Moreover, when you mentioned him, you didn't talk about his cultivation level or identity first, but about his personality first. The two of you must have become Dao companions because you love each other, right? You didn't become Dao companions because of an elder's order or because of cultivation between fellow disciples. At this point, Chiu Qingruo's gaze revealed a hint of depression. This puzzled Mo Tiange. Fellow Daoist Chiu, what you're saying. Could it be? Chiu Qingruo forced a smile. After a while, as if unwilling, she said, my senior martial brother and I became Dao companions because of what Master said. Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows. But looking at you two, Chiu Qingruo sighed softly and said, of course, since we become Dao companions, we naturally have feelings for each other. She looked at Mo Tiange with a complicated gaze. In fact, I really envy you two. You're not martial brothers and sisters, and you don't have any interests in it. Mo Tiange was silent for a while. Looking at Chiu Qingruo's sad expression, she finally said, my husband is also my senior martial brother. Chiu Qingruo was stunned and surprised. Then you too, since we become Dao companions, what does it matter if we're martial brothers and sisters? She said with a smile, fellow disciples naturally have more opportunities to get along and develop feelings than others. Isn't this very normal? And Chiu Qingruo answered softly. The depressed expression on her face faded a little, and she looked at Mo Tiange with a smile. Perhaps because of what they said just now, she became closer to Mo Tiange. Unlike before, although they were affectionate, they still carried a hint of politeness. By the way, where's the medicinal pill fellow Daoist mentioned? I almost forgot about the important matter. Mo Tiange smiled and took out a jade bottle from her Qianquan bag. She said, the ingredients for this medicinal pill are too complicated. I failed several times before I succeeded in concocting this bottle. Chiu Qingruo took it, pulled out the cork, and poured out a medicinal pill. This medicinal pill was bluish-green in color and carried a refreshing fragrance. One whiff of it would make people feel energized. Chiu Qingruo first observed the medicinal pill's color, then sniffed its fragrance. In the end, he dipped his finger into the powder and tasted it. In the end, he revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. Fellow Daoist Qin, I didn't expect your pill concocting skills to be so outstanding. This medicinal pill has almost no impurities. It's indeed of the highest quality. Mo Tiange smiled modestly. I'm just very interested in pill concocting. In terms of pill concocting skills, my senior martial brother is actually more outstanding. Really? Chiu Qingruo was surprised. Your pill concocting skills are already comparable to the best concoctions masters in my Danxia sect. Fellow Daoist Chiu, you praise me too much. Chiu Qingruo tasted the powder of the medicinal pill again, then poured it back reluctantly. He asked, fellow Daoist Qin, this medicinal pill should be used to detoxify, right? What's it called? It's called Refreshing Breeze Jade Dew Pills, Mo Tiange said. It's used to detoxify, but it can also be taken to guard against fog and the like. Really? Chiu Qingruo looked at the jade bottle in his hand, hesitated for a moment, then said, fellow Daoist Qin, I want to exchange other things or spirit stones for your Refreshing Breeze Jade Dew Pills. What do you think? Mo Tiange muttered, this. Chiu Qingruo hastily added, rest assured, fellow Daoist Qin. I definitely won't take advantage of you. You can name your price. That's not what I meant. Mo Tiange said, to be honest, the success rate of this medicinal pill isn't high, and the ingredients are very complicated. I only managed to concoct this one bottle. Chiu Qingruo looked at the jade bottle in his hand, sighed, and handed it back to her. That being the case, I won't force you. However, if fellow Daoist Qin succeeds, please consider it. Of course. Mo Tiange nodded with a smile. The two of them continued to discuss pill concocting for a while. Although Chiu Qingruo's pill concocting skills weren't as good as hers, they weren't weak either. Some of his pill concocting techniques were unique to Yunzhong, so Mo Tiange benefited a lot from them. Just as they were happily chatting, they suddenly sensed a powerful aura coming from afar. In an instant, all the cultivators in the room quieted down. This kind of aura. City Lord Mei must have arrived. Chapter 400. Ha 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 ha. A hoarse and somewhat shrill voice rang out. Soon after, City Lord Mei walked in from the door and cupped her hands towards everyone with a smile on her face. Young friends, I've come late. Please forgive me. City Lord Mei looked like he was 15 years old. Not only did his appearance not mature, but even his voice was still changing. This City Lord Mei looked really young, but when he moved, everyone in the room was respectful, treating him as their leader, no matter what his background was. When facing a nascent soul cultivator or a core formation cultivator, they had to maintain the corresponding courtesy. This was true everywhere, and there was no exception. Once City Lord Mei finished speaking, all the core formation cultivators in the hall politely returned his greeting. Someone even answered, "We wouldn't dare. City Lord Mei is a senior. We've only been waiting for a while, so how could we dare to take offense?" City Lord Mei revealed a faint smile. Her gaze swept across the room, then she sat down on the master's seat. Seeing that everyone else was still standing, she said, "Everyone, please sit down." Upon hearing her words, the cultivators in the hall scattered and sat down. Mo Tiange and Chiu Qingruo sat nearby. Nia Wushang and Yong Ryu also returned to their sides and sat down. The hall was completely silent. Only the faint sound of City Lord Mei drinking tea could be heard. After a while, City Lord Mei put down her teacup, faced everyone and said loudly, "Young friends, I'm an impatient person. I presume everyone already knows why I've come here today." Of course. City Lord Mei, we're also impatient people. Please speak frankly. The one who spoke was a robust devil cultivator in the middle stage of the core formation realm. Once he spoke, the two early stage devil cultivators next to him chimed in. Mo Tiange had noticed them before. These three people should be together. The robust devil cultivator was the leader while the other two called him Big Brother. Mo Tiange didn't know whether they were real brothers or sworn brothers. These three people's words and actions were very arrogant. When everyone gathered to talk just now, they repeatedly observed the Dao cultivators in front of them. Their gazes weren't very friendly. City Lord Mei faintly smiled and said, "Little friend Jean, sure, don't worry. I've invited you here. So, I'll explain everything clearly." He paused for a moment before he raised his voice and said, "Dear friends, all of you have been waiting in Descending Star City for a long time for the secret place to open. Some of you have even waited for more than a month. I would like to express my apologies for wasting your time. As of now, 15 core formation cultivators have agreed to my request and are willing to go to the hidden place. The number of people is enough. Since that's the case, I'll open the restriction of the secret place today and let all of you try it out." What do you think? Most of the cultivators present were overjoyed when they got the exact news. The only reason they were willing to stay here was because of this ancient place. Or else why would these completion-leveled cultivators waste their time? Now that he had finally achieved his goal, there was no need for him to wait any longer. City Lord Mei was very satisfied when he saw everyone's expressions. He said, I'm sure all of you have heard about the specific information about the hidden place from the elders of Descending Star City. I won't say much about it. I will only say 2 things about this trip to the hidden place. First, this hidden place is an ancient trial ground. Every trial will last for a maximum of 3 days. After that, all participants will be thrown out of the hidden place. Therefore, please make the best use of your time. Second, I don't care what kind of rewards you obtain during the trial. However, if you obtain the Heavenly God fruit, please hand it over. Otherwise, I will have my ways. City Lord May's eyes were filled with power as he swept his gaze across the crowd. Prior to this, City Lord May's attitude was kind and his words were polite. He didn't have the slightest arrogance of a nascent soul cultivator. It was only now that everyone realized that he was a genuine nascent soul cultivator. Seeing that everyone was silent out of fear, City Lord May laughed and said, My friends, there is no need to be so nervous. It doesn't matter if you succeed or not. As long as you leave the hidden place, I will give you a small reward for your hard work. Even though you are all core formation cultivators and don't think much of it, it is still a small token of my appreciation. Hee hee. The strong demonic cultivator from before spoke first. He laughed and said, City Lord May is too polite. You allowed us to enter the hidden place. What other requests do we have? This time, City Lord May only smiled and didn't reply. She said, All right, my friends, I'm sure everyone is impatient. Let's not waste any more time. Let's depart. Then, City Lord May stood up and led the way out of the hall. She waved her sleeve and stepped onto her flying magic treasure. Once everyone was out of the hall, they followed City Lord May and turned into rays of light that chased after them. At this moment, the idle cultivators of Descending Star City noticed a rare sight. In the sky above Descending Star City, more than 20 rays of light flew past. They were of different colors. It looked as if all the core formation cultivators of Descending Star City had gathered together. Hey, everyone, look at the sky. A cultivator who wanted to see the world in chaos shouted, There are so many core formation cultivators. What are they doing? Hearing his voice, people came out from the streets and shops to look up. Ah, it's true. There are so many people. Did all the core formation cultivators of Descending Star City move out? Are they fighting? Maybe they found some treasure and are fighting with people from other demon territories. TSK, so many core formation cultivators. How impressive, yeah, when can I also form my gold core and show off? The core formation cultivators flying in the sky naturally couldn't hear these low-level cultivators' envious words. They were focused on following City Lord May to the secret place. After leaving Descending Star City and entering Mount Xinglua, which was also known as Mount Jiaoling in Eastern Tang, Mo Tiange felt the devil aura was getting thinner and thinner. Gradually, they went deeper into the mountain range. The fog was everywhere, so she couldn't tell where they were going. Fellow Daoist Mo, after flying for a while, Nia Wushang whispered to her, Do you remember the way you came? Mo Tiange tried to recall, but she was shocked. I can't remember clearly. The memory of cultivators was much better than that of mortals. They could easily remember an event that happened several decades ago or a person they met. Mo Tiange had never experienced this kind of situation where she couldn't clearly remember the path she had just taken. She carefully recalled. She felt she could remember everything clearly after leaving the city, but after entering the fog, she could only remember a few rough turns. She couldn't remember exactly how far she flew. Thinking up to this point, Mo Tiange looked at Nia Wushang. Both of their foreheads were covered in cold sweat. There was definitely something wrong with that fog, but she didn't know whether the others had discovered it or not. At this time, City Lord May, who was flying in the front, suddenly turned around and said, "Little friends, this is Descending Star City's bewildering trace fog. Aside from being bewildering, it doesn't have any other harmful effects, so you don't need to worry." Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang glanced at each other. They both saw vigilance in each other's eyes. City Lord Mei was a nascent soul cultivator, one realm higher than them. He must have heard their secret voice transmission just now, so he deliberately turned around to explain. But his behavior, in the eyes of the two of them, made them even more vigilant. In a situation where City Lord Mei was present, it was actually impossible for them to communicate alone. The two of them couldn't communicate, so they could only ponder on their own. Mo Tiange calmed down and slowly pondered. She had always been used to doing things alone. Now, she could just assume that Nia Wushang wasn't present and make her own decisions. In any case, ever since she got to know Nia Wushang, the two of them behaved very similarly, so presumably, there shouldn't be too much of a difference. They were now in the bewildering trace fog, and City Lord Mei was leading the way in front of them, so escaping was unwise. That being the case, she could only be patient and calmly observe the situation. In any case, aside from City Lord Mei's own subordinates, there were 15 core formation cultivators here. Presumably, he wouldn't be able to deal with them as he pleased. With this thought in mind, Mo Tiange's heart calmed down a bit. She looked at Nia Wushang again, and the latter also gave her a meaningful glance. The two of them smiled at each other and, with a tacit understanding, continued to hurry on with their journey. The dense fog dispersed after a while. City Lord Mei was the first to stop in midair. She then said in a loud voice, "Everyone, we've arrived. This is the secret area. There's a miasma below. Please take out the wooden puppets that I've given you." Upon hearing what she said, the other cultivators took out their puppets one after another and began to wear them. Mo Tiange hesitated for a moment. She glanced at Nia Wushang and shook her head. She then took out the Tai Chi 8 trigrams from her Qianquan bag and put it in her sleeve, signaling Nia Wushang to come closer to her. The Tai Chi 8 trigrams had the function of stabilizing yin, yang, and the 5 elements. In addition, she had already given Nia Wushang Cool Breeze Jade Dew pills, so it shouldn't be a problem for her to prevent this small miasma. They didn't move for a long time. In the end, City Lord Mei still glanced at them. Fortunately, she didn't pay too much attention to them because there were also other cultivators who had other methods and didn't use those puppets. This wasn't strange at all. Which core formation cultivator didn't have a few secret techniques? Preventing miasma, such a small matter naturally wouldn't pose a problem to them. However, everyone had their own preferences, so they chose the puppets they provided without much certainty. "Everyone, are you ready? Let's go down now," City Lord Mei said, then turned into a flight light and swiftly descended. The means of a nascent soul cultivator was undoubtedly revealed. Soon after, the several Starfall City elders she brought with her also descended. Upon seeing this, the others also followed closely behind them. When everyone stopped, Mo Tiange raised her head to take a look. This place was a small canyon. The mountain wasn't steep, and the terrain wasn't dangerous. The passages on both sides were very wide, and there didn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary. The place they stopped at was a small highland above the canyon. Behind them was a slightly higher cliff, and in front of them was a slightly lower basin. There was neither devil aura nor spiritual aura in this place, so there shouldn't be any spirit veins here. The distant past era's secret place was actually in this kind of place. However, this wasn't impossible. The distant past era was different from the current era. Perhaps spirit veins had already disappeared with the vicissitudes of time. "My young friends," City Lord Mei turned around and said with a smile, "this is the secret place that I was talking about. From now on, I and several elders will use our secret technique to open the restriction. Young friends, hurry up. City Lord May didn't waste time and called the several Starfall City elders over. With him as the center, a total of 6 people walked down the canyon until they finally stopped in the middle of the basin. Soon after, City Lord May gave an order, and under his lead, a core formation cultivator used their secret technique. Immediately, 6 rays of light shone and pierced the sky. Chapter 401. When the light dispersed, a whirlwind suddenly rose inside the small canyon. This whirlwind wasn't big, so it wasn't even worth mentioning to the core formation cultivators. However, the aura coming from the whirlwind made everyone's expressions change. Aura. This was the aura of the distant past era. Although the core formation cultivators hadn't entered the distant past era's secret land, they weren't ignorant people. This desolate and distant aura was definitely something left behind by the distant past era. Now, everyone believed that there was an distant past era's secret land here. Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang glanced at each other. Both of them relaxed a bit. This aura couldn't be faked, so City Lord May's words became a bit more believable. When the whirlwind settled down a bit, a hexagram formation appeared in the center of the basin. When Mo Tiange saw it, she felt even more assured. With her attainments and formations, she could naturally see that this formation was a genuine distant past era formation. Little friends, City Lord May said loudly, please come here. The core formation cultivators on the plateau hesitated for a bit, but some of them stepped forward and walked down. Seeing that someone was moving, the others hesitated for a bit before they also followed. After everyone entered the basin, City Lord May said, I found this transporting formation here. Once you enter the transporting formation, you'll be transported randomly. Therefore, little friends who have decided to move together, please enter the transporting formation together. Right, this formation can transport up to 5 people at a time. The elders should have told you about this, right? Upon hearing what she said, more than 10 core formation cultivators moved and stood together with their companions. City Lord May swept her gaze over everyone and revealed a smile. Alright, let's begin. For a moment, everyone was in a wait-and-see state. Everyone had a herd mentality. Very few people were willing to be the first to take the lead, even if they were cultivators. They all wanted to enter the secret land, but in the end, would there be other dangers in the secret land? This was something they couldn't be sure about. After a while, someone finally stepped forward. Senior May, us 3 brothers will go first. It was the rather arrogant and burly cultivator from before. City Lord May smiled and said, little friend Jinshur is willing to go first, so there's naturally no problem. The 3 of you just need to step forward. With the burly cultivator leading the way, the 3 devil cultivators stepped onto the teleportation array. Suddenly, the teleportation array lit up, surrounding the 3 of them. The light grew brighter and brighter, and in a flash, the 3 of them disappeared into the teleportation array. Mo Tiange wrinkled her brows. Judging from the technique used to set up this teleportation formation and the way it was being teleported, it should be an ancient spirit diagram. However, the teleportation speed was a little slow, and it seemed like it lacked spirit energy. Could it be that the spiritual energy supporting this secret place was running out? If that was the case, would the secret place still be complete? She looked at City Lord May and the elders of Descending Star City. Their expressions were calm and they did not seem to have noticed this problem. After thinking for a moment, she shook her head. Forget it, no matter what, the teleportation array can be activated, and the spiritual energy in this secret place should be able to last for a while, right? It was better to let the future generations worry about this problem. As he thought about this, more and more people stepped onto the transportation formation. Of the 15 core formation cultivators, only 7 remained. Aside from the 3 burly devil cultivators, most of the others moved alone or in pairs. There were very few people who moved in groups of 4. After the green-robed swordsman stepped onto the teleportation array alone, Yongryu said, "Fellow Taoists, should we also go?" Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang both nodded, indicating they had no objections. The 4 of them stepped onto the teleportation array together. A moment later, the light dispersed. When the 4 of them saw their surroundings, they were shocked. The cold wind whimpered around them, and the messy snow blinded their eyes. They were actually in a snowstorm. Upon discovering this, Mo Tiange immediately waved her sleeves. With the help of the Tai Chi 8 diagrams, the spiritual aura fluctuated, sweeping away the cold wind and snow in the surroundings, creating a clean space around the 4 of them. Soon after, the 4 of them looked up and were even more shocked than before. As far as their eyes could see, there was a boundless ice field with no end in sight. Icebergs stood in great numbers around them, and the ice was abrupt. The environment was dangerous. Standing on the ice field, the 4 of them looked like 4 little ants. In the snowstorm that filled the sky, they were so insignificant that they were almost not worth mentioning. "What's going on?" Chiu Qingruo was the first to shout while looking at Yongryu. Yongryu frowned, seemingly also uncertain. She looked at Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang. "Fellow Taoists, in your opinion, this kind of topic was naturally answered by Mo Tiange. While releasing her divine sense to explore, she said, an illusory formation. This was almost nonsense. They entered the ancient secret land through a teleportation array. Since this secret land was for the purpose of training, the unreasonable scene in front of them was naturally an illusory formation. However, the problem was that although everyone knew it was an illusory formation, they couldn't see any trace of it. Fellow Daoist Qin, what should we do? Nia Wushang asked. Mo Tiange didn't answer. She took out the Tai Chi 8 diagrams from her sleeve, shook her sleeve, and the Tai Chi 8 diagrams unfolded out of thin air. The Tai Chi 8 diagrams on the picture were dazzling. Upon seeing this picture, Yongryu and Chiu Qingruo's eyes lit up. They were disciples of a big cultivation group, so their eyes didn't need to be mentioned. They could tell at a glance that this Tai Chi 8 diagrams was a top-grade magic weapon. Mo Tiange looked at the flow of the Tai Chi 8 diagrams on the picture, then closed her eyes to sense the 5 elements and yin and yang around her. After a while, she opened her eyes and said, "Yes, it's indeed an illusory formation." Seeing how certain she was, Yongryu looked happy and asked, "Fellow Daoist Qin, you can see it?" Mo Tiange smiled, put away the Tai Chi 8 diagrams and said, "Fellow Daoist Yong, don't have too much hope. I can indeed see that this is an illusory formation, but this formation is very clever. I have no idea how to break it." Yongryu waved her hand and said, "Since it's an ancient place for training, it's normal that fellow Daoist Qin can't break it in a short time. If you can figure out the key to breaking it with just a glance, then your attainments in formations would be too amazing." Mo Tiange couldn't help but smile. What Yongryu said was right. Even if she knew some ancient formations and even Xuanji formation books, she was a cultivator of the present, not someone from the Middle Ages. How could she break the formation in a short time? She was the one who asked too much of herself. Then what should we do now? Chiu Qingruo looked worried. "We only have 3 days. Senior Marshal Brother and I don't know much about formations, so I'm afraid we won't be able to help. What about fellow Daoist Tian Kan? Does he know anything about formations?" Nia Wushang shook her head silently. Chiu Qingruo sighed. "Doesn't that mean we can only rely on fellow Daoist Qin alone?" "Fellow Daoist Chiu, don't worry." Mo Tiange said calmly, "Think about it. If you were alone and entered the formation, what would you do?" Chiu Qingruo tilted his head and pondered. "Alone. I can only try using some things to break the formation. If that doesn't work, I'll try fighting on this ice field to cause spiritual aura turbulence. At that time, I'll suppress the spiritual aura here and maybe I'll pass. If that doesn't work, I'll have to endure these 3 days and withdraw regretfully. You're right. Mo Tiange said, although formations are used in the land of trials, they don't test the participants' attainments in formations. Therefore, we'll just go through the test as usual. In this world, there were not many people who were proficient in arrays, but every trial was inseparable from arrays. Therefore, the true purpose of these arrays was not to trap people, but to let the trial takers experience some kind of test. If the trial taker was strong enough, or had a clever mind, then they would pass, and there was no need to break the array. What fellow Daoist Qin said makes sense. Yong Ryu nodded in agreement. Junior Marshall sister, think about the trial methods in our group. Aren't they the same? Even if this is the Middle Ages land, it can't be separated from the scope of trials, so we don't need to worry too much. Once Yong Ryu spoke, Chiu Qingruo's complexion became a lot better. The 4 of them reached a consensus. Mo Tiange waved her hand, removing the barrier she laid a moment ago. She said, everyone, use your spiritual aura to protect yourselves. This should be one of the tests. The other 3 people also used their spiritual aura to protect themselves, blocking the wind and snow. Nia Wushang looked deeply at Mo Tiange with a hint of a smile in her eyes, but she didn't say anything. She knew Mo Tiange removed the barrier because it was a bit strenuous for her to protect the 4 of them, not because this was a test. However, she didn't think there was anything wrong with Mo Tiange doing this. In this secret ancient land, they still didn't know the situation, so it wasn't the time to abuse their sympathy. She was also in the middle stage of the core formation realm, so she didn't need Mo Tiange's protection. As for Yong Ryu and Chiu Qingruo, if they didn't have enough strength, they didn't need to be responsible for their lives. Once everything was ready, Mo Tiange said, let's go. This is an illusory formation for the test. As soon as we move, it should cause spiritual aura turbulence. Yong Ryu and Chiu Qingruo nodded and followed Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang, walking forward. The 2 martial siblings were in the early stage of the core formation realm, while Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang were in the middle stage, so they should be the leaders. Moreover, Mo Tiange had a spiritual treasure and was very familiar with formations, so she naturally became their leader. As the 4 of them walked forward, the spiritual aura in their surroundings began to turbulence. This turbulence became more and more intense, gradually forming a spiritual aura vortex around the 4 of them. This vortex wasn't obvious. If it were a circle, it would cover a very large area, so the other 3 people didn't feel it. However, Mo Tiange had the 8 trigrams diagram in her sleeve, which allowed her to sense the fluctuations of spiritual aura in her surroundings to a very subtle degree. If it could be said that the 4 of them had entered a test map when they arrived at the ice field, then the formation of this spiritual vortex was the true test. Be careful, Mo Tiange reminded them when she sensed the spiritual aura vortex was becoming more and more obvious. We've already triggered the formation, so there will be a test at any time. Yong Ryu and Chiu Qingruo nodded cautiously, and Nia Wushang also had a solemn expression. This was an ancient secret land, they hadn't forgotten this point. Ancient divine abilities were mysterious, subtle, and hard to describe. They weren't something current cultivators could hope to achieve. If they were careless, they might be defeated in an instant. They agreed to Castellan May's request to enter the secret land because they wanted to experience the ancient divine abilities and comprehend their mysteries. If they were immediately defeated upon seeing the ancient divine abilities, they would lose the meaning of this trial. The wind around them grew stronger and stronger, carrying with it snowflakes that rushed towards them. Although it didn't really hurt their bodies, their eyes and ears could sense the momentum that was rushing towards them. At this time, the spiritual aura vortex had already formed. It was like a big mouth that was about to pounce on them. Chapter 402. The moment the spiritual aura vortex rushed towards them, everyone reacted differently. Nia Wusheng, who was wearing a boxing glove, threw a punch at the ice field. With a loud bang, the snowy mist on the ice field flew up and formed a barrier around her. Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua each took out a jade bracelet and intertwined them. The two jade bracelets combined into one and emitted a dazzling light from the point where they intersected, forming a powerful shield that protected the two of them tightly. As for Mo Tiange, she fumbled in her Qianquan bag and took out the white silk handkerchief. With a light wave, the white silk handkerchief turned into mist and surrounded her. Of course, these were just self-protection methods. The Middle Ages trial wouldn't let them pass so easily. After stabilizing themselves in the snowstorm, the four of them used their own methods to fight against the snowstorm that attacked them. In the beginning, although Mo Tiange was cautious, she didn't care too much because they had just entered the land of the trial. Logically speaking, this trial shouldn't be too difficult. However, not long after, she became more and more surprised. These snowstorms seemed to have intelligence. They could actually adjust the direction and strength of their attacks according to the changes in the spiritual aura around her. The Middle Ages' divine power was indeed unusual. After fighting for several breaths, they blocked the snowstorm several dozen feet away again. Mo Tiange shook her sleeves and summoned the 8 trigrams of Tai Chi. Then, she turned her wrist and summoned the heaven and earth fan. The cold wind became fiercer and fiercer. Ice chips and snowflakes hit the spiritual aura barrier around the four of them, carrying a powerful momentum. The four of them held their breath and focused, fighting against the invisible snowstorm giant. The snowstorm became fiercer and fiercer, as if there was a faint hand controlling them from behind. The four of them were able to handle it with ease in the beginning, but gradually, they became flustered. Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua were in the early stage of the core formation realm. Although they could defeat ordinary cultivators, they were only on par with a middle-stage core formation cultivator like Mo Tiange. As for Mo Tiange and Nia Wusheng, although they weren't unable to handle it, their spiritual aura was slowly becoming chaotic. Calm your mind. Upon realizing this, Mo Tiange shouted, "We have to join hands." In any case, if they worked together and supported each other, the situation would be better than fighting alone. They wouldn't lose sight of each other. These past few days, Nia Wusheng and Mo Tiange had developed a certain level of tacit understanding. Now, without saying a word, she immediately approached Mo Tiange. But what surprised them was that Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua also came over to them without the slightest hesitation. Mo Tiange felt a bit strange, but she also felt very relieved. When they traveled together, they were not afraid of being on guard against each other, but they were afraid of not being able to cooperate at the critical moment. Although the cultivation levels of these two people were slightly low, they were both smart people. If the two of them joined hands, they would have considerable strength. In this case, at least she and Nia Wusheng wouldn't be a burden. The four of them met up, and the surrounding snowstorm immediately became more intense. However, everyone only needed to be in charge of one direction, so it was much easier than before. Mo Tiange unfolded the heaven and earth fan. Countless petals and branches flew out of the fan, entangling with the wind and snow in front of her. As her cultivation level increased, she gradually figured out several ways to use the heaven and earth fan. Inside the fan of heaven and earth, not only were there mountains and rivers, there were also flowers, birds, fishes, and insects. All of them could be materialized. As long as her skill was high enough, she could make them materialize and use them as fighting techniques. Seeing her method, Yong-ryu looked at her with surprise. The four of them met up. Mo Tiange had spare energy now, so when she saw his look, she couldn't help but ask, "Fellow Taoist Yong, is there something wrong?" Yong-ryu shook her head. "It's nothing. It's just that fellow Taoist Qin's magic weapon is very powerful. Its control of spiritual aura has reached a subtle level. Even though cultivators from Yunzhong are famous for being good at controlling spiritual aura, it's not easy for them to reach this level. I'm just a bit surprised." She wasn't a cultivator from Yunzhong, which was what she said when they met in Sky Snow City. It wasn't strange for Yong-ryu to have such an idea. But Mo Tiange just smiled and didn't explain much. This magic weapon came from Mo Yaoqing's idea. Mo Yaoqing was originally a cultivator from Yunzhong, and she was also a genius, so she had her own way of thinking about controlling spiritual aura. After Mo Tiange refined this magic weapon according to her idea, she slowly fumbled along Mo Yaoqing's ideas, so she naturally made great progress in controlling spiritual aura. With the four of them working together, the invisible hand controlling the whirlpool of wind and snow gradually weakened. Just as the four of them breathed a sigh of relief, the snowflakes flying around them suddenly froze into ice cubes and smashed down. "Watch out!" Nia Wushang shouted. She then leaped into the air and punched the air with her fists. Upon seeing this, Mo Tiange's heart trembled. It wasn't only because of the ice cubes, but also because of Nia Wushang's strength. Her fists that struck the air were almost illusory. With the strength of her fist technique alone, she managed to block these ice cubes. Martial cultivators. So this was a martial cultivator. What formidable strength! In the past 100 years, Mo Tiange hadn't seen many martial cultivators, and she hadn't seen any who reached the core formation realm. When she followed second uncle and wandered about, she once saw a martial cultivator. That martial cultivator was the same as second uncle. He was already more than 200 years old, but he was still in the early stage of the foundation building realm. He said martial cultivators were a bit stronger than ordinary magic cultivators in fights of magical power, but it was much harder for them to make a realm breakthrough. Those who could cultivate to the core formation realm were as rare as phoenix feathers and qilin horns. He cultivated painstakingly for more than 200 years. With his martial strength alone, many middle-stage cultivators were no match for him, and he could even fight against late-stage cultivators. However, he couldn't see any hope of making a realm breakthrough. He believed that if a martial cultivator advanced to the core formation realm, he would be even stronger. However, he didn't have the chance. Mo Tiange didn't know what happened to that martial cultivator. He was just a person she and second uncle came into contact with during their wanderings. She understood this martial cultivator's desolate and helpless feeling, but she didn't have the chance to verify his words. It wasn't until today, when she saw Nia Wushang attacking with all her strength, that she realized what that martial cultivator said was right. A martial cultivator who cultivated to the core formation realm was a terrifying existence. If she didn't have so many spiritual treasures, if she was just an ordinary core formation cultivator, she definitely wouldn't be Nia Wushang's opponent. Thinking up to this point, Mo Tiange glanced at Nia Wushang with a complicated expression. After a while, she couldn't help but laugh. She didn't want to enjoy the pleasure of giving pointers to Nia Wushang when she befriended him. On the contrary, she hoped to have a like-minded person with whom she could discuss and advance together. She was confident that she wasn't an ordinary core formation cultivator, and she also had lofty ideals and firm confidence. That being the case, the stronger Nia Wushang was, wouldn't it be more motivating for her? The strength of a friend shouldn't be a pressure to hold her back, but a motivation to speed up. Why are you in a daze? If you don't help me, I'm going to die of exhaustion. Nia Wushang's grumbling voice reached her ears. Mo Tiange regained her train of thought and showed a faint smile. The momentum on her body suddenly became stronger, and she continuously waved the heaven and earth fan. Countless flowers and trees knocked away the falling ice cubes. An hour later, the ice cubes gradually disappeared, and the spiritual aura in their surroundings finally returned to normal. The four of them heaved sighs of relief. Each of them found a place to sit down and began to recover their spiritual aura. According to their current situation, they should have passed this test. An ancient divine ability was an ancient divine ability after all. In this trial, every one of them was almost exhausted before they could pass. However, Emotianga also felt a bit strange. She always felt that although this illusory formation was brilliant, it wasn't powerful enough. Logically speaking, an ancient divine ability shouldn't only have this kind of power. However, it wasn't entirely true to say that this wasn't an ancient divine ability. She indeed sensed an ancient divine ability's aura from it, and she also sensed its profoundness and subtlety. This was too strange. Unable to think of a reason, she shook her head, sat cross-legged, and closed her eyes, concentrating on recovering her spiritual aura. In any case, they were still in the middle of the trial. If they couldn't recover their spiritual aura in time, it would have a huge impact on the later trials. Just as this thought crossed her mind, she immediately realized something was wrong. Oh. How could this be? Chiu Qingruo's surprised voice reached her ears. Mo Tiange opened her eyes and stared at her. Chiu Qingruo's complexion was deathly pale. He stared at her, then turned to look at Yong Ryu. Senior martial brother, I seem to be unable to recover my spiritual aura. I tried for a while, but the spiritual aura in my body didn't increase even a bit. Yong Ryu's expression changed. He turned to look at Mo Tiange and Nia Wushang. Fellow Taoists, what about you? Nia Wushang frowned and said, You're right. I've been adjusting my breathing for a while, but the spiritual aura in my body didn't increase. Upon hearing Nia Wushang's affirmation, Yong Ryu's expression became somewhat complicated. He seemed to feel a bit relieved, but he also seemed more nervous. He said with a heavy voice, Me too. Right after he said that, he and the other two people looked at Emotianga. Being stared at by the three of them, Emotianga also nodded. In fact, when she was meditating just now, the spiritual aura in her body increased slightly, but it didn't mean she wasn't affected. Now that she had Yang's spiritual aura, she had a chaotic body, and her body formed a world of its own. Even if there was no external supplement, her spiritual aura could still circulate endlessly. Because of this, the spiritual aura in her body recovered a bit faster than others, and she also had a slight advantage in fights of magical power. But just now, she only felt some spiritual aura recovered because of the circulation in her body. She didn't absorb any spiritual aura from the outside at all. As everyone knew, when cultivators meditated to recover spiritual aura, they could either absorb spiritual aura from the outside to replenish it or circulate spiritual aura in their meridians during the great circulatory cycle, which could produce weak spiritual aura. However, the spiritual aura produced by the latter was extremely weak, so in most cases, cultivators absorbed spiritual aura from the outside. It was also for this reason that spirit veins played a vital role in cultivators' cultivation. But now, when they were meditating and adjusting their breathing, they couldn't absorb spiritual aura from the outside at all. It was as if the spiritual aura in their surroundings had been silently stolen. If they were in the secular world, a place without spirit veins, this kind of situation would be very normal. However, they could clearly feel the surging spiritual aura in their surroundings. Strange. This was too strange. There was endless spiritual aura in their surroundings, but they couldn't absorb it. It was as if this spiritual aura was isolated from them. Even though they were core formation cultivators, this kind of situation still surpassed their understanding. According to common sense, this kind of situation shouldn't have happened. What went wrong in the end? Could it be that this spiritual aura couldn't be absorbed? Silence spread among the four of them. Everyone was contemplating, but none of them could figure out the reason. After a long time, Emotianga took a deep breath and said, "We'll talk about this later. Right now, we have to recover our spiritual aura. We can't delay any longer." With her reminder, the other three people seemed to wake up from a dream. They each took out medicinal pills and spirit stones. Since they couldn't absorb spiritual aura from the outside world, they could only rely on external objects. Chapter 403. 2 hours later, everyone stopped to adjust their breaths. With the help of spirit stones and medicinal pills, they had recovered their spiritual aura, but judging from the pile of spirit stone powder around them, it was obvious how many spirit stones they used. The amount of spiritual aura a core formation cultivator's meridians and dantian could hold was unimaginable for low-level cultivators. Several low-grade spirit stones could keep an aura-refining cultivator full of spiritual aura, but for core formation cultivators like them, the spiritual aura from low-grade spirit stones was basically dispensable. Only mid-grade spirit stones or higher could have an immediate effect. But mid-grade spirit stones were rare, and they were usually used to set up formations or in emergencies. Who would use them to replenish their spiritual aura? Therefore, they could only use low-grade spirit stones to replenish their spiritual aura. But even so, none of them had full spiritual aura. Since they couldn't absorb spiritual aura from the outside world, the speed of spiritual aura recovery was too slow, and they couldn't afford to waste it for a long time. Emotianga was the same. But her situation wasn't bad because she had a lot of restorative panaceas, and her body could still produce spiritual aura. Although it wasn't full, it wouldn't affect her strength. "The formation is broken," Chiu Qingruo said happily after adjusting his breath. The power of the snowstorm gradually dissipated, and the ice field also gradually disappeared, revealing a cave. Emotianga smiled. Sure enough, the purpose of formations in the trial ground was just to test them, they didn't need to break the formation. But when she looked around, she became cautious again. They were currently in a cave. It wasn't accurate to say that it was a cave. To be more precise, it was a cave. It was a cave that extended in all directions and had many forks. Just where they were at, there were 3 to 5 forks. These forks were deep and serene, leading to unknown places. "Fellow Daoist Qin?" Nia Wushang asked in a low voice. Is there a problem?" Emotianga shook her head and said, "No, but do you think it's real or fake?" Nia Wushang looked for a while then shook her head. "I know nothing about formations, so I can't see through it." "Fellow Daoist Qin," Yong Ryu interrupted, "I think it's real." "Oh." Emotianga was quite interested. "What do you think, fellow Daoist Yong?" Yong Ryu smiled and said humbly, "I'm the same as cultivator Tian Kan, I know nothing about formations. Therefore, this is only my speculation." He paused and said, "First, the terrain. I remember that when we entered the teleportation array, we were in the Jiaoling Mountain. This cave seems to fit the description. Secondly, the spiritual energy in the surroundings is very stable. It doesn't seem like there's an illusory formation here." Emotianga nodded then said, "What fellow Daoist Yong said is correct. I also feel the same way. Since fellow Daoist Qin also thinks that it's not an illusory formation, then this scene is indeed real?" Chiu Qingruo said. Emotianga shook her head. "Fellow Daoist Chiu thinks too highly of me. Although I know a little about formations, I don't know much about ancient divine abilities. How could I possibly miss nothing?" When Chiu Qingruo heard this, he felt that it was true. How could the cultivators of today compare to the ancient divine abilities? Even a true array master might not be able to see through an ancient illusion array. In any case, since fellow Daoist Qin can't see through it, it means it's relatively safer. Chiu Qingruo looked at the fork in the road ahead and asked, "What should we do next? What else can we do?" "Of course we keep going," Yong Ryu said. She then turned to look at Imo Tiange and Nie Wushang. "Fellow Daoist Qin, fellow Daoist Tian Can, don't you think so?" Imo Tiange and Nie Wushang both nodded. Looking at the situation in front of them, they indeed had no other choice but to walk down this cave and see if they could find any clues. However, Imo Tiange also felt a bit strange. That city lord mate said this was a trial ground and that if they passed, they'd get a lot of rewards. How did he know all this? He said he didn't pass the trial when he entered, but after they came in, they passed the trial, right? She hadn't seen any notification about the trial. Imo Tiange's intuition told her that something was wrong. She must have missed something. "Fellow Taoists, let's go, shall we?" Yong Ryu called out again when she saw that Imo Tiange didn't move. Imo Tiange nodded, then followed behind them, slowly walking into one of the forks. The path they took was the one in the middle on the left. This path was chosen by Nie Wushang. When Chiu Qingruo asked her, she casually punched the ground, creating several cracks. The biggest one pointed to the middle, so she chose the middle path. The current situation wasn't clear, so it didn't matter which path she chose, so the other three didn't have any objections. As they walked, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Although Yong Ryu's cultivation level wasn't obvious, he was extremely meticulous. After Imo Tiange glanced at him, she felt reassured and let him lead the way while she continued to ponder. Since she felt she missed something, she had to start from the beginning. First, when she and Nie Wushang went to Starfall City to check in, Elder Liang of Starfall City came to invite them under City Lord Mei's order. Later, City Lord Mei told them about the discovery of the ancient secret place and asked them to enter the secret place to obtain the heavenly god fruit for him. Finally, he led the core formation elders under him to open the secret place and let the 15 core formation cultivators enter. After thinking about it carefully, Imo Tiange realized there wasn't any problem with the general course of events, so the problem should be with the details. Details? Which step of the details had gone wrong? Fellow Daoist Imo, what are you thinking about? Nie Wushang's low voice rang in Imo Tiange's ears. Imo Tiange regained her train of thought and said, I think there's something wrong with this matter." Upon hearing what he said, Nie Wushang cast him a glance, and her eyes brightened. "You also think so?" "Also?" Imo Tiange frowned. "Could it be that I felt there was something wrong after we set off, but I couldn't figure out what it was. Besides, City Lord Mei was outside, so I couldn't send you a voice transmission." "Really? What do you think the problem is?" Nie Wushang thought for a while, then said, "I'm not as meticulous as you, but you know my master cultivates devil cultivation techniques, so I know more about devil path cultivators than you do. First of all, I think there's something wrong with the way they opened the transporting formation. Since this is an ancient secret place, even if they used their own method to cover it with restrictions, they shouldn't have covered it directly. You should know that things left behind from ancient times usually have pure spiritual qi. Although demonic cultivators can absorb spiritual qi, they have to go through some special mental cultivation method. This way, they can directly cover the demonic path restriction on the pure spiritual qi, which can counteract the restriction." "Is that so?" Imo Tiange indeed didn't know much about devil path cultivators, but after thinking about it, she felt something was wrong. "According to what you said, there should be something wrong with that transporting formation, but I saw it. It's indeed an ancient formation. At this point, both of them felt puzzled and didn't know what to say. Fellow Daoist Qin, fellow Daoist Tiancan. Qiu Qingrua suddenly turned around and asked, "What's wrong with you?" Both of them were preoccupied with their own thoughts, so they unconsciously fell behind them. "Oh, nothing." Mo Tiange quickened her steps to catch up with them. Seeing Yong Ryu's inquiring gaze, she thought about it and finally said, "Fellow Taoists, you're native cultivators of Yunzhong, so you must have a good understanding of Yunzhong's situation. Is it really normal for you to invite irrelevant people to explore the ancient secret place like this?" Both Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua were stunned. They stopped and stared at her. Mo Tiange continued to say, "Shouldn't they keep such a good place for themselves? Starfall City isn't big, so if they have this secret place to support them and train their cultivators well, it'll be very beneficial for them." Hearing this, Yong Ryu frowned and muttered, "What fellow Daoist Qin said makes sense. So fellow Daoist Yong also thinks something's wrong." Yong Ryu thought for a while, then shook her head. "I'm not sure. Fellow Daoist Qin, I don't know what kind of place your hometown is, but in Yunzhong, there have been cases of people who discovered secret places and enjoyed them for themselves, but in the end, they were discovered by big cultivation groups, leading to tragedies. Therefore, after City Lord May discovered the secret place, she didn't want to monopolize it, but rather took advantage of the other forces before they could react. It's not incomprehensible." "Oh. So that's what happened." Mo Tiange stopped talking. In other words, she was wrong about this reason, right? But she believed in her intuition about this matter. It definitely wasn't because she was paranoid. She was sure there must be something wrong here. "Fellow Daoist Qin," Nia Wushang suddenly said, "let's put it this way. Do you think this secret place matches the scale of an ancient secret place?" Mo Tiange stared at Nia Wushang in surprise. Nia Wushang also stared at her and continued to speak in a hoarse voice, "You're also a cultivator from a big cultivation group, so your knowledge is extraordinary. Do you think this place can be considered an ancient secret place?" Mo Tiange was suddenly enlightened after hearing his explanation. She was right. Although there were traces of the Middle Ages everywhere, it was too simple to call it an ancient secret place. For example, the first trial they passed, the snowstorm on the ice field, indeed contained the profoundness of an ancient divine ability, but its power was too weak. It merely exhausted their spiritual aura and couldn't cause any substantial harm to them. Upon seeing Mo Tiange's expression, Nia Wushang showed a faint smile. "Although I'm not as meticulous as you, I'm a martial cultivator, so I'm naturally sensitive to power. I dare say this isn't an ancient secret place at all. It's just a fake secret place created by applying the skin of some ancient divine ability." Once Nia Wushang said this, Yong Ryu's and Qiu Qingruo's expressions changed greatly. Yong Ryu stared at Nia Wushang for a long time before she finally asked, "Fellow Daoist Tiancan, what do you mean?" "What else could I mean?" Nia Wushang said faintly, "Fellow Taoists, you two also have extraordinary backgrounds, so presumably, your horizons aren't low either. Think about it carefully. How could an ancient trial be so easy to pass? You should know that we're core formation cultivators, so we can use magic weapons. Magic weapons from the Middle Ages had great magical powers, so how could a core formation trial be so easy?" Yong Ryu and Qiu Qingrua were speechless for a long time. After a while, Qiu Qingrua said in a low voice, "Our Dansha sect also has a secret place, but senior martial brother and I are only in the early stage of the core formation realm. The sect advised us to enter only after our cultivation levels are higher, but..." Her gaze stopped on Nia Wushang's face for a while, then she said, "What fellow Daoist Tiancan said is reasonable. This trial is indeed too easy. Even if we're stronger than ordinary cultivators, it's impossible for us to be unscathed. Moreover, it also exhausted our spiritual aura, Mo Tiangath suddenly interrupted. She stared at the three people in front of her and said in a heavy voice, "Fellow Taoists, I'm afraid we've already entered a trap. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."